Mark Fisher Colbury.
Here.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Fred Fisher.
Here.
Elena Flowers.
Present.
Judy Gasson. I know Judy's here. She might be on mute.
Here.
Yes, thank you. Larry Goldstein.
Here.
David Higgins.
Here.
Steve Julesgaard.
Present.
Rich Lahara.
Here.
Pat Levitt.
Here.
David Lowe.
Here.
Linda Malkus.
Here.
Shlomo Melmed.
Here.
Christine Miskowski. Lauren Miller Rogan. Adriana Padilla. Joe Panetta. Al Rolette.
Present.
Marvin Southard.
Present.
Michael Stamos. Jonathan Thomas.
Here.
Art Torres. Art, I know you're here. Art. Christina Vori.
Here.
Carol Watson. Keith Yamamoto.
Here.
Thank you. JT, we have a quorum, just barely, but we have them for right now.
Yes, thank you, Maria. As you will see from Dr. Milan's presentation, there's been a lot of things happening involving Serm and our wonderful Serm team over the recent period. I wanted to highlight one of those, which is the meeting last week of the International Society for Stem Cell Research, ISSCR, which was held in San Francisco and was in person for the first time in 3 years. And this is the meeting which brings together all of the world's stem cell scientists into one group, which is always a most interesting session, which features many different talks, breakout sessions, plenary sessions, and very importantly, lots of sidebar meetings that you get to catch up with people and hear what the latest is. And I wanted just to relay, there were sort of three particular areas of science that I thought the board would find interesting, that of the many that were discussed at this meeting. The first is as you know, there's been a great deal of work using induced pluripotent stem cells, or iPSCs, in the last 15 years. When the iPSCs are created, when the process was first developed by Dr. Yamanaka, the resulting cells were young cells, and that created some issues, because one of the great benefits of the iPSC technique is to be able to take cells, particularly from patients with neurodegenerative diseases, and do high throughput drug testing to look for candidate therapeutics. And if you have young neuro cells in a dish, the disease in question really has not had a chance to turn into a full-blown phenotype that you can test against. And so the leader in work in that regard for a number of years on how to mature the cells so that you can match the phenotypes with the testing, as Dr. Lorenz Studer from Sloan Kettering. And he's given a number of talks over the years on the progress of his work in trying to derive mature cells from iPSCs. And at this session, he reported that his lab has largely succeeded now in using a cocktail, as it were, of proteins to differentiate into, I'm not sure if they're fully mature cells, but very mature cells which reflect neurodegenerative phenotypes in a way that you can now test against them and have a much better chance of getting drugs that correspond to the particular condition in question. He delivered that in one of the plenaries, which was a a very interesting and a very major development in the use of iPSCs going forward. Second thing was there were, as there have been in recent years, even in obviously the virtual meetings last couple of years, a lot of talk surrounding increased use of organoids, which are are masses of cells that essentially resemble organs in a dish that are used for testing, but not just that, but the use of something called gastruloids, which are similar 3D masses of pluripotent stem cells that mirror post-implantation embryos in a dish, to which you can do experimentation on, and similarly blastoids, which are again 3D masses of pluripotent stem cells that essentially resemble pre-implantation embryos. So you have the sort of the full spectrum of these synthetically created different types of testing systems to use for your drug testing going forward. And that has created an increasingly useful set of tools that can be used along with other things, such as animal cell models, and of course, ultimately clinical trials. The third thing I wanted to mention, which is sort of in its early stage, because it relates to one of Dr. Milan and the team's main areas of interest in the strategic plan, was a discussion on the ability to continuously monitor cell cultures and to use artificial intelligence and machine learning to essentially predict how the cell cultures will mature over time, which sort of is an intersection between stem cell biology and data science. And it has the opportunity to improve differentiation of cell products, and also to predict how cells might react once they're in transplantation, which will all of which will be increasingly valuable to predict where things are going with those cell groups. So those are just three of the many things that I thought were particularly interesting from this session. And these things are online, and I would welcome folks who are interested to go back and see the different talks that were given and to hear about what was said. I'll just last comment on ISSCR. I had the privilege of moderating a panel on regenerative medicine and anti-aging, which was most interesting. And that panel covered a wide range of topics. This was every ISSCR has a public session where folks are welcome to come. That was a little tricky this year because of COVID, and the public was able to access online, but we had a very spirited discussion with scientists and Adrian Shapiro representing the patient advocates. And I think the session was a success, and I would welcome you to go back and take a look at that. That was one of the least technical of the sessions you'll see that the ISSCR sort of approaches things from a bit of a different angle. So the other thing I wanted to mention here, in addition to that set of comments on ISSCR, we have another one of those bittersweet moments, which we've been previewing in earlier sessions, which is David Martin moved to North Carolina in May, and as a result is no longer in California and therefore not able to continue on the ICOC. We had it at the last application review subcommittee that he attended. He was able to make some very nice comments to members of the board. we told him that we were going to have an official resolution at this meeting, and unfortunately, David was not able to attend. But Maria's put this up, and I'd like to, if I may, just read this, because as with all of our board members, David is most impressive, and I think that the members of the board would enjoy hearing about his wonderful career. So if you indulge me here. So whereas Dr. David Martin received his undergraduate degree from MIT, whereas Dr. Martin received his MD and completed his postgraduate medical training at Duke, whereas Dr. Martin served at the NIH for 3 years, whereas Dr. Martin was a professor in the Department of Medicine and Biochemistry at UCSF from 1969 to 1982, and also served as an investigator at the Howard Hughes Medical Institute. Whereas in 1982, Dr. Martin joined Genentech as the first vice president of research and development. Whereas Dr. Martin became executive vice president of research and development at the newly formed joint venture between DuPont and Merck in 1991. Whereas in 1994, Dr. Martin became the president of Chiron Therapeutics. Whereas Dr. Martin co-founded EOS Biotechnology in 1996 and became chairman and CEO of Gangagen in 2003. Whereas Dr. Martin served as a board director of Cubist Pharmaceuticals for 12 years and of Varian Associates and Varian Medical Systems for 17 years, the last 10 years as lead director. Whereas Dr. Martin is co-founder, chairman, and CEO of Avid Biotics, a privately held biotechnology company in South San Francisco. Whereas Dr. Martin was appointed to Serm by the California State Treasurer, John Chung, in 2017, and has served on the Application Review Subcommittee, Science and Industry and IP subcommittees. Whereas Dr. Martin, through his experience, commitment, knowledge, and leadership, contributed greatly to the momentum of discovery and the future of therapies, which will be the ultimate outcome of the dedicated work of the researchers receiving CIRM funding. Be it resolved that the governing board of the California Institute for Regenerative Medicine, on behalf of the people of the state of California, wishes to express its deepest gratitude to Dr. Martin for his service on CIRM's governing board and for his dedication to the advancement of stem cell research and to the mission of CIRM to accelerate stem cell treatments to patients with unmet medical needs. On behalf of the board, although again, David's not able to attend, just for the record, want to express our sincere appreciation to David for his 5 years of service and his tremendous contributions as a colleague to all that we have been doing in that time. And I know that the board shares that sentiment, and he will receive a framed copy of that resolution that he will be able to proudly display at his next job. I'm not sure if he's going to have an office, you never know these days, but wherever he's going to be working in North Carolina. So that concludes my chair's report. Next up, we have the president's report, and we'll turn it over to Dr. Milan.
Thank you very much, Chairman Thomas. Sean Patel is going to project the slides just to make it smoother for everybody. Thank you so much, Sean. So Chairman Thomas, members of the board, members of the public, and CIRM colleagues, in today's President's Report, I'll give an update on our progress toward our 5-year strategic goals. Sean Patel will give an industry, landscape, and business development update. And these will provide context to the budget proposal that the team's been developing these past several months that will be presented by Pune Simpson later at this meeting for the board's consideration. In addition, Sean Turbyville, CIRM's head of medical affairs and policy, will also give a brief update on the discussions at the AAWG, the Accessibility and Affordability Working Group, regarding a concept proposal for a CIRM patient assistance program. Next slide, please, Sean. So after your approval of the strategic plan in December, we launched that plan at the beginning of this year with a mission to accelerate world-class science and to deliver transformative regenerative medicine treatments in an equitable manner to a diverse California and world. Next slide, please, Sean. This plan is organized around three major strategic themes represented here in these dominoes. The first is to advance world-class science in cell and gene therapy, and I will go through each of these goals along with our updates to that individually. The second theme is to deliver world-class solutions that tackle scientific, regulatory, manufacturing, and healthcare delivery challenges of these promising trials and therapies to bring them to patients in need. And the third is to provide opportunity for all by fostering diversity in future leaders and the workforce to cultivate this new field. And also, as importantly, is to develop a roadmap for access and affordability to the trials and treatments that are advanced by CIRM. Next slide, please, Sean. So for the first theme, advancing world-class science, we continue to fund rigorous and promising cell and gene therapy science through our funding pillars and acceleration model, while at the same time developing new concepts and approaches to empower the scientific discoveries via shared resources and knowledge networks. This past quarter, we launched the Discovery Zero program to fuel basic mechanistic and foundational research. As we've often said, good treatments, good therapies, strong therapies that work start with rigorous science. So we're very proud that in addition to the DISC-2 program announcement, which is basic discovery to identify potential development, therapeutic development candidates, this DISC-0 is a very pure basic science to really elucidate the biology that we may not still know well enough to develop these treatments. In addition, the team has constructed a data sharing and management plan guidelines. Gil Zambrano, Rosa Canadavillas, Sean Patel, and other members of the team really worked hard to make sure that we provide resources to our grantees. So when they're fulfilling and creating a plan for data sharing, it really is able to leverage important resources. And then this is something we can kind of continue to build upon in our quest for creating the best knowledge networks with future programs. The ICOC has approved in just this past quarter alone, 19 Discovery 2 grants, 4 translational and 3 clinical awards. I'll give a little bit more detail on that in a second. And through our Serm Conference Award, we've been able to support 3 major conferences. I'll also give an update on that. It's important because these conferences provide the forum for knowledge networks for the scientists, Serm team members, the community and the industry to be together and get updates on the most recent advances and have the opportunities to form collaborations and discussions, as all of you know from attending these conferences yourself. In addition, the Serm team also organizes a variety of less formal but still extremely important workshops and meetings. And most recently, the Pluripotent stem cell webinar that allowed exchange of knowledge between industry and academia regarding what types of cells are available, the characterization of these cells, and how these could be useful to a broad range of stakeholders. These past months, as I mentioned earlier, we have been looking at our strategic plan, have been planning for the next year, and have been developing a budget accordingly. You'll have both the research and administrative budget presented by Pune Simpson, our Director of Finance, later today. These are all based on sound rationale and justification to support a plan to continue to advance our strategic initiatives. Next slide, please. Just a little bit of detail on what you have awarded just this quarter alone. We have funded 19 discovery awards in the areas of neuroscience, blood disease, heart and cancer, and more. 4 translational awards advancing 2 gene therapy approaches, 1 gene-modified cell therapy and 1 device, addressing diseases in the eye, heart, cancer, and kidney. And we have now, CIRM has now directly funded a total of 80 clinical trials, with 3 new programs coming into its clinical portfolio just this past quarter. And cancer, dysphagia is a dysfunction in being able to swallow that results from damage, radiation, and other types of damage, and epilepsy. Of note, the epilepsy program is actually the result of 4 prior CIRM awards that funded the earlier work, both to the earlier research and the translational activities to bring it to this stage. So another example of how our funding program provides a continuous track to be able to support programs all the way through. Next slide, please. In addition to promoting data sharing in our grant process, you will hear a little bit more of detail on that in upcoming meetings, but we're making great progress in that. And in addition to developing concepts, which you will be hearing in the upcoming year, to create approaches and resources for knowledge network, data sharing, and resource sharing. CIRM scientists, patient advocates, and CIRM team members share knowledge and build collaborations and networks on the ground through active participation in national and international conferences. You've heard a little bit about this from Chairman Thomas about the ISSCR, but I'll just go briefly through the types of presentations that CIRM awardees as well as CIRM team members have been involved in. At this year's American Society of Cell and Gene Therapy, there were 3 major talks given by CIRM investigators, CIRM grantees. Dr. Don Cohen, who also received the Outstanding Achievement Award at that meeting. Dr. Stephanie Cherky from UCSD, whose CIRM program is gene therapy for a metabolic disorder called cystinosis. And Dr. Mark Jasinski, who's advancing a stem cell approach for spinal cord injury. At the International Society for Cell Therapy, that took place in San Francisco just weeks ago, 6 plenary sessions and roundtables were given by our investigators, Dr. Mark Cohen, Howard Foyt, former Chief Medical Officer at Biosite, a program that advances diabetes, Dr. Maria Roncarola from Stanford, who presented her work on T regulatory cells, David Miklos, Mark Walters, Fyodor Urnov. You'll hear many more about these investigators and their programs at upcoming meetings where our team will continue to update you on our portfolio. Sean Patel, the Director of CIRM's BD and Alliance Management, was able to update the Society on CIRM programs, our funding announcements, our progress, and our strategy. And Dr. Abla Creasy led a regulatory roundtable at the meeting and also assisted by Dr. Sean Turbeville, who is in medical affairs and policy. We also, for the first time, had a CIRM booth. I'll show pictures in a bit, thanks to Sean Patel and Sean Turbeville and Maria Bonneville and her team for being able to make this possible. Having a booth at these meetings gives us presence, visibility, and an opportunity to share a lot of information on our programs, from things such as our funding opportunities to even potential positions at CIRM. And so established investigators from CIRM, as well as new investigators, new students, and people from other areas that didn't even know about CIRM were able to come to our booth and interact with our team. It's really a huge add. And in particular, I want to thank Sean Turbeville, who brought in, a very sophisticated platform for us to do this. This past week, as Chairman Thomas had mentioned, was the International Society for Stem Cell Research, the first in-person meeting in a while, 3,000 attendees. 32 talks and poster presentations were given by our CIRM grantees, including Dr. Clive Svensson, Kyle Lowe, Corey Nicholas, that's the epilepsy program, Don Cohn again. And Dr. Cohn has really furthered a platform approach with gene therapy, lentiviral gene therapy for a variety of indications and immunodeficiency syndromes, a variety of cases. Young-Hong Shi, Deepak Srivastava, the president of the Gladstone, also a Serm scientist who has advanced work in the cardiac area, and April Pyle. And importantly, 14 of Serm's very own Bridges interns, the undergraduate master's program interns at Bridges, the Cal State with stem cell labs across California, had presented poster presentations at the meeting, and they individually have posted their experience. It's been very inspiring and really exciting to have that representation here at the meeting, as well as to be able to provide the young pipeline of scientists with this exposure. Kevin McCormack from the Director of Patient Outreach and Nancy Renee, one of CIRM's CAP Clinical Advisory Panel advisors and patient advocate, both were involved in a panel at the ethics session on public engagement and the importance of public engagement. As mentioned, JT, Chairman Thomas, along with Dr. Srivastava, Dr. Carmichael, Adrian Shapiro, our sickle cell patient advocate, hosted a public symposium. And the CIRM team participated in a CIRM sponsored diversity, equity, inclusion workshop, which was extremely well received, well attended. And in fact, it's something that had gained so much visibility that there is interest in making this more broadly available at upcoming meetings. And Maria also was involved in a discussion across a variety of institution leaders and society leaders on equity, diversity, and inclusion. And there's deliverables from that session that will be something that CIRM will work into its own consideration of this very important topic, as well as others on a society level. Our senior science officers, Uta Grishammer and Ross Okamura, participated in a conversation on quality standards that will result in a white paper or guidelines that the society will generate. And again, the CIRM booth was a huge success, a great place for gathering our stakeholders. Next slide, please, Sham. One slide can take up a lot of time. There's a lot of activity. So the next area, the next pillar in our strategic plan is delivering real-world solutions. And stated here are the CIRM's 5-year goals in this area: to advance therapies to marketing approval, which has been at the very core of our goals over the years, create a manufacturing partnership workshop, expand the Alpha Clinics network, and create the community care centers of excellence. And in this past quarter, our progress in this area involves the Alpha Clinics expansion. We have received applications, a very robust response to this program opportunity, and that's in the review process currently. You will be seeing that come to you later in the summer. And CIRM has joined the Bespoke Gene Therapy Consortium. This is an important action that we've taken to advance knowledge networks and accelerate development, and I'll explain that in the next slide. Next slide, please. Thank you, Sham. So CIRM joined the Accelerating Medicines Partnership Bespoke Gene Therapy Consortium. This was just announced. The announcement is shown here, announced by the Foundation for NIH. This consortium is composed of the NIH, the FDA, over 20 private sector partners, and now CIRM, and it's managed by the Foundation for the NIH. The goal of this consortium, you'll see the schematic on the right provided by the FNIH, is to create a standard blueprint for the accelerated development of adeno-associated virus gene therapies for rare genetic disease. Just to explain, the AAV is not an infectious virus. It actually is a gutted way to put the gene material into the cells. And so this has been something that is in development in a variety of indications. But the goal of this consortium is to address especially the ultra rare and rare indications where it's really tough to develop that right now to get that attention, except for within academia. Serm eligible programs will be part of the consortium. So when we will deploy our standard funding mechanism and we'll go through the standard peer review, but once the board approves for funding, what'll happen is these programs will be able to enter and receive the benefits of being in a consortium, including shared knowledge, interactions with the FDA, and a variety of other benefits to being in the consortium. Serm sits on the steering committee. Abla Creasy, who's our VP of Therapeutics Development, will be our representative, with Shyam Patel as the alternate. They both were instrumental and Dr. Creasy initially in leading us to make sure that we pursue this partnership, which was extremely important. And she and I presented to Peter Marks, who is the head of FDA's department for the review of gene therapy programs. He sits on the committee as well as the leadership at the NIH. And the variety of stakeholders. And there was a lot of excitement for Serm to join this network. Shyam Patel was instrumental in really crafting the agreement and shepherding that through. So many thanks to the both of them. This is an exciting opportunity for us to really advance what we had articulated in the strategic plan in terms of an efficient, knowledge-guided knowledge network to advance a platform approach to these technologies. So whereas these address ultra rare and rare diseases, so as a single indication, there may be few patients, but in aggregate, there are thousands and thousands of patients with these rare and ultra rare genetic diseases. So if there's a platform technology, which will be something that the FDA can be comfortable with, one can envision that would lead to a more efficient development and approval of therapies for more broad indications that could benefit from cell and gene therapy. Next slide, please, Shyam. Okay, so the third pillar is the providing opportunity for all, and this really speaks to the very important goals of CIRM to build a diverse and highly skilled workforce of leadership. I'm getting some feedback, Maria, so maybe. And to deliver a roadmap for access and affordability. So in terms of the progress this quarter, you will be hearing from Dr. Sean Turbeville in a little bit of a summary of what's been going on to develop a patient support concept proposal that will be brought to this board later on this year, probably in September. But these discussions have been informed by the discussions at the AAWG meetings of May 17th and June 21st. So later on in this meeting, you'll hear from Dr. Turbeville an update on that. In addition, regarding our education programs, as you know, when we first got reauthorized with Prop 14, some of the major programs, in addition to restarting the pillar programs that CIRM had funded, were educational programs. And then most recently, a new program called the Edu5 or the Compass, which is creating opportunities through mentorship and partnership across stem cell sciences program, fosters mentorship and research opportunities for a unique niche of underserved and underrepresented student communities within California's colleges and universities. We're very excited about this, and the applications have been received, are in the review process, so you'll hear more about that. Okay, next slide, please. This is my last slide before I hand it off to the team. So the CIRM team, just to give you an update of how, especially in this virtual format, we will soon be returning and reopening the offices, but we have really had a soft opening in that we have had in-person meetings, and that's been really valuable for us. But the CIRM team has weekly knowledge sharing meetings, journal clubs, sharing of the goings on and new programs within the organization, as well as quarterly updates where we specifically address the goals of the individual teams related to the broad annual goals, which feed into the 5-year strategic goals. So I just wanted to highlight that this is something we do every quarter. In the middle, you'll see the picture of the Serm team at our Q1 all hands meeting at the conference center near our new headquarters in South San Francisco. You will see on the left side some team members, and on the bottom right, and that's our CIRM booth. It's really been a spectacular asset for us, and being a go-to place. You see there are chairs there, so scientists, students, interested community members have an opportunity to really learn about CIRM, discuss with our team, and a lot of collaborations, identification of potential programs that can come to us. It can happen because people look for where we are at the meeting. So that's been spectacular. At the very top of the picture, you will see a picture of a session that is related to creating diverse cell banks in order to advance a more complete science. This is something that CIRM feels very strongly about. There was a paper that we co-published with the Allen Institute and the ASAP, Aligning Science Across Parkinson's, in Nature just several months ago, which we shared with you. And then in response to that, the ISSCR, so our team, and I want to thank Maria Bonneville and Sean Patel, we have really partnered with the ISSCR. So when we awarded them a conference award, we were instrumental in shaping sessions such as this. And so our team members, Sean Patel and Russell Kumara, for instance, recommended the speakers for this session on diverse cell banks. And this session was moderated by Kevin Agan, formerly at the Broad, who actually used the induced pluripotent stem cell bank of Serm to create these cell villages and characterize them. He is a huge proponent. The other panelists were Marissa Medina, a Serm awardee at UCSF, and Joseph Wu at Stanford. They all highlighted the importance of these resources to advance basic and translational research. And then here's on the right side is a picture of Chairman Thomas, along with the panelists that I mentioned earlier at the public session. On the bottom left was a picture of me with Carl June. You may recognize him. He's at the University of Pennsylvania, the father of CAR-T technologies. Richard Mulligan, MIT professor, entrepreneur, recently co-founded SADA Biotherapeutics. And you can't see his face, but that's Ned Sharpless, former head of the NCI. This session, which was moderated by Ravi Thadhani at the World Medical Innovation Forum. Ravi is the chief academic officer. You may recognize him because he was previously in California, has a high regard for our programs. The session was on the critical role of academia and academic industry partnerships in the field. So that's a great introduction then, or a good segue to, I'm going to hand that off to Sean Patel because as part of our engagement with the broad stakeholders, we really have a very strong partnership with industry. And Dr. Patel will be able to give us an update on the state of the industry, CIRM BD update. And so I will take some questions if Chairman Thomas, you think I should, and that I'd love to be able to introduce Dr.
Sure, that'd be great, Maria. But I need to. We have a potential quorum issue. So after you field your questions, if we may, like to skip straight to the budgets to make sure we get those approved. Then we'll come back to Sham for his presentation. That's all right.
Absolutely.
Okay. Questions for Dr. Milan? Can you see the
I can, so I see
Steve,
Dr. Jolsgaard and Dr. Abusalam both have their hands up.
So Maria, real quickly, as you know, Proposition 14 allocated $1.5 billion for the research, therapy, development, and therapy delivery involving diseases and conditions of the brain and central nervous system. So are we developing plans to really start working in that area? That's a lot of money to spend. And what are we thinking about in terms of really trying to kickstart that area?
That's a huge area of interest for us. And just by way of background, even just through our pillar programs and our programs themselves, we will reach that even if there wasn't a deliberate, action even today. However, we are taking deliberate action. We are figuring out the best way to efficiently bring together in a consortium approach, although we're not yet ready to launch a consortium RFA or a moonshot or anything like that. But a lot of the workshops and the concept development that's being led by Dr. Canet Aviles is related to the structure of how these types of research can be more efficiently organized around the data platforms, the shared core resources that can advance, just characterize cell models, et cetera. We will be giving an update on a variety of our portfolio programs at each of the upcoming meetings by themes, and one of them will be neuro in the coming future, probably not until probably early next year. It'll give us a chance to really mature what we've done, as well as make some more headway in terms of the associated infrastructure related to data sharing and shared resources. That you'll see that. But suffice it to say, we're not concerned. We are tracking how much we are expending on those programs, and it looks like it's tracking where we'd want it to be in terms of proportion of the portfolio.
So one follow-up question, because I think because it was written the way it was written into Prop 14, Prop 14 expects a certain level of effort to go into this, as some focus, et cetera. Have you considered hiring somebody, a senior person within your organization, basically to oversee this whole area, kind of, bring it together and help us proceed? Because I think these are pretty important diseases to address.
Absolutely. In fact, we did hire Dr. Rosa Canet Aviles, who's in charge of putting this together, neuroscientist who actually helped to create many of the programs at the FNIH, the Accelerating Medicinal Partnership and Parkinson's and Alzheimer's, et cetera. So she's very well connected, very knowledgeable of the space. We have many neuroscientists internally who have been helping Rosa and me and the other team members. And we actually have many really highly expert and high profile external stakeholders and advisors who are helping us through this, including those who attended the President and Chair Joint Scientific Strategy Advisory Panel. So there are many follow-on conversations with those advisors, as well as other collaborative efforts. So those are all occurring in the background, and when it's ready for us to be able to really shape this to something that can be brought to the board, it'll be a little bit more apparent. But I wanted to reassure you that we, in fact, it's a very much a focus. And in fact, when we're thinking about broad umbrella type programs, our demonstration cases are for neuro for that very reason.
Thank you, Maria.
Thank you.
And Maria, can I just mention an update?
I'm going to take Dr. Abu Salam's comment, Rosa, real quick, and then maybe can you do me a favor? Can you float that update to Maria Bonneville, just because of the time constraints, because it could be that we can address it in another session. Thank you, Rosa. Dr. Abu Salam.
Thank you, Dr. Milan, for this encouraging progress on these strategic goals. My question is a simple one. I'm curious to know how you select the 3 conference awardees and how you ensure diversity, equity, and inclusion in that process.
Thank you so much, Dr. Abu Salam. Is Dr. Zambrano is on the line right now? Is that correct?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay. So Dr. Zambrano is the lead on this program, and I'll have him present the process and the criteria. Dr. Zambrano?
Sure, just very briefly. So we really rely on the applicants that come to Serm. So these are, we have an open application process basically throughout the year. We have 4 deadlines per year where folks who are interested in putting together a conference come to us. And so we have a process where we review the applications for their goal to, in some way, align with Serm's mission. We do have requirements as part of the proposal, if they are to be funded, that they make an effort to diversify and provide DEI elements within the conference. So that is part of the assessment that goes into it. So that was just very brief.
Thank you.
Thank you for that question. Chairman Thomas, I don't see any other hands up.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Maria, for excellent presentation, and to members of the team for all the continued outstanding work across many different fronts. We're going to skip now to one of our action items, which is the consideration of the CIRM administrative budget for fiscal 22-23. We'll have a presentation by Pune Simpson. Pune?
Good morning, Chair and members. Pune Simpson, Director of Finance. I'll be presenting the 22-23 budget. And with all presentations, we like to start with our mission statement, which is accelerating world-class science to deliver transformative regenerative medicine treatments in an equitable manner to a diverse Californian world. And I will share the agenda for the administrative budget first. I'll be going over the 21-22 ICOC approved budget and an update on the major drivers that impacted it this year. And then I'll move on to the 22-23 proposed budget and the major drivers that resulted in the budget we're proposing. So starting with the 21-22 budget, I wanted to cover some of the major context that impacted it. This was our first full year after the relaunch and passage of Prop 14, during which we launched the 5-year strategic plan and ramped up staffing to address the increased workload. The 21-22 budget included 55 total positions. We had an ambitious plan to fill our new positions, and I'm happy to report that we filled 11 positions and 2 are still in the recruitment stage. We're currently at 47 full-time employees. We increased our reviews this year, and we closed the Oakland office and are in the process of moving to our new headquarters. Finally, COVID did affect our activities, both in terms of personnel recruitment, travel, and the progress of our funded programs and related activities. And this resulted in some savings that I will be talking about in the next few slides. So first, I just wanted to show you a picture of what was approved by the board, what the estimated to finish is, and what that variance is. So the second column in this chart represents what was approved by the board, $22.9 million. The agency estimates that it will finish at $18.2 million, which is shown in the third column. And the variance between those two, $4.8 million, is shown in the fourth column. These savings resulted from the team's management of expenditures and keeping costs down while still growing and increasing our initiatives. The 3 categories that I want to focus on are the ones that had the greatest savings that you can see in this chart. They were the employee expense, external services, and rent. These 3 categories combined represent 84% of the savings that you see on this chart. So 4 million of the 4.8 million in savings are attributed to these 3 categories. So I want to focus on these 3 in a little bit more detail to explain why there were savings. Some of the expenditures in these categories didn't materialize. So for example, with regards to employee expense, we did have an ambitious plan to fill positions. And through the hard work of HR and the leadership team, we did fill 11 positions, but we still had some vacancies that we were not able to fill or are still recruiting for. So even though we anticipated filling the 13 positions by the end of the fiscal year, the projected timeline took longer than anticipated. We also made a decision not to fill 3 positions that resulted in some savings, more of a strategic decision in terms of where the need is. And together, those factors contributed to the $3 million in employee expenses. With regards to external services, we built a budget with funds for contingent recruitment and external legal services contracts in anticipation of some of the need that we might have this year. But we've been able to capture savings in these categories as those services were not required as anticipated. That resulted in a savings of $563,000. And finally, with regards to the move costs, through the diligent effort of the staff and shopping around for the best prices, the actual contracts for the move came in below what we had anticipated. So again, we built the budget estimating we needed more, but we had savings in this category. And we were able to capture savings of $417,000. So with that, I want to move on to the fiscal year 22-23 proposed budget and how it relates to what I just shared. With regards to the 22-23 budget, I wanted to share a chart that has what we have this year, what our estimated to finish is, and what we're requesting. So we're requesting a total of 26.2 million, which is in the 4th column of this chart. But I, again, want to put it in the context of what we had and what we spent. So the 2nd column represents the 21-22 budget of 22.9 million. The 3rd column is the estimated to finish, which we just discussed. And then what we're requesting, 26.2 million, which results in a variance of 7.9 million or 8 million if we round it, between what we're asking and what we are estimating to spend this fiscal year. There's 3 major categories that contribute to the variance, to that large variance between what we spent and what we're asking for. Again, I'll be focusing on those 3 large dollar amounts. They're in the categories of employee expense, external services, and reviews, meetings, and workshops. Before I go on, I want to point out that due to COVID, our travel was very restricted, and we weren't traveling. But now that the world has opened up and we do plan on traveling, we're proposing a travel budget in 22-23. So you see a very large percentage in the travel category, but it's a very small amount of money with regards to our overall budget. So I won't be covering travel because it's not a very large amount, even though it looks like it's a large percentage because we're going from no travel to some travel. So I'll focus on the 3 big dollar amounts. So with regards to employee expenses, the first key driver is the hiring of additional proposed staff of 10 positions. We also have some funds included here for the full year cost of the half-year positions that were approved as part of the mid-year budget. We also have the full year cost of the patient advocate per diem, which we had budgeted for half year last year. And finally, we have some increases with regards to benefits that are mandated by the state that we have no control over. The overall impact of the salary and employee expenses is $5.7 million. The second area of expense is the increase in external services. This primarily is related to consultants for program development and contingency, legal, and move contracts. Again, some of those expenses we anticipated this year might happen next year, so we're building in the contingencies for them. And like always, should we not need those funds, we will be returning them at the end of the year. Finally, the increase in reviews, meetings, and workshops. This, again, is a result of the world opening up again, and we can have in-person meetings. We're having a little bit higher costs because of the in-person meetings, and we're having more advisory workshops. So that's increasing our costs, an estimated $850,000. Finally, with regards to the risk factors we're facing this year, we continue to actively manage costs. However, there are still some things out of our control, including the office move, the recruitment and personnel growth, and COVID. So we do recognize that there may be factors like that that may impact our budget. So finally, and in conclusion, I am requesting that the ICOC approve the 22-23 fiscal year budget of $26.2 million. I'm happy to take questions, and I'm happy to go back to any slides if you have any questions.
Thank you, Pune. Do we have a motion to approve this budget from members of the board?
So moved.
Second.
Maria, did you get?
I believe that was Kim and Marvin. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions or discussions from members of the board? I'll note off the top, of course, that this was fully vetted by the Finance Subcommittee chaired by Mr. Roulette. So do we have questions or comments from members of the board?
I see George has his hand raised.
George?
Yeah, just a quick question. Do you have an estimate of when you expect the move into the new facilities to be completed?
I will defer to Kevin on that question.
Sorry, George, I had to come off mute. We're in conversations with the property management firm at this point in time. We were anticipating originally a late July sort of partial move-in where we could share the facility while we're doing construction. We're still in conversations around that. So right now, I just estimate that by the end of the summer, we will be able to be in the new facility.
Okay, thank you, Kevin. Other questions or comments from members of the board? Any comments from members of the public?
I don't see any.
Thank you. Maria, will you please call the roll?
Haifa Abdullah,
Yes.
Mohammed Abuslam,
Yes.
Kim Barrett,
Yes.
Dan Bernal,
Yes.
George Blumenthal,
Yes.
Michael Botchin,
Yes.
Linda Boxer,
Yes.
Leander Clark Harvey,
Yes.
Anne Marie Dulage, Isabel Dudon, Mark Fisher Pulvery,
Yes.
Fred Fisher,
Yes.
Elena Flowers,
Yes.
Judy Gasson,
Yes.
Larry Goldstein,
Yes.
David Higgins,
Yes.
Steve Julesgard,
Yes.
Rich Lahara,
Yes.
Pat Levitt,
Yes.
David Lowe,
Yes.
Linda Malkus,
Yes.
Shlomo Melmed,
Yes.
Christine Miskowski, Lauren Miller Rogan,
Yes.
Adriana Padilla, Joe Panetta, Al Roulette,
Yes.
Marvin Souther,
Yes.
Michael Stamos,
Yes.
Jonathan Thomas,
Yes.
Art Torres,
Aye.
Christina Vori,
Yes.
Carol Watson, Keith Yamamoto.
Yes.
The motion carries.
So you heard me, Maria, right?
I did hear you. Thank you,
Thank
Art.
you.
Thank you, Maria. We're going to go right now. Beth, if you can bear with us here a little longer, go straight to the consideration of the science budget for FY 22-23. Pune will once again present. Pune?
Yes, so I'll just skip the introduction and the mission and go straight into the agenda. We're going to go over the 2022 approved research budget and then go over the requested 22-23 proposed budget and the major drivers for it. So first off, with regards to the 21-22 approved budget, I have a chart that in the second column shows what the board approved in terms of research budget. And so we started with a budget of $474.3 million. And it's broken out by the 5 pillars that we have. So we broke out the commitments in 2 columns to show the activity that has taken place and the pending awards related to the 21-22 fiscal year that haven't taken place. So we're displaying this a little bit different this year so that you can see what already happened and what is about to happen. So the 3rd column represents the commitments that have taken place to date, $206 million. And I just wanted to note that these dollars include the decision that was made on Thursday with regards to the DISC awardees. The 4th column is pending decisions related to the 21-22. Because the process starts with the RFPs and the GWG and the ARS, there are some that saddle 2 fiscal years, but we want to recognize that these relate to the budget that was approved in 21-22. So $162.2 million will be reviewed and decided on in August, September, and October of this upcoming fiscal year. And the total between what has already been decided and what is pending is in column 5. So a total of $368.5 million is anticipated in terms of research expenditures for 21-22. The variance is the last column, $106.8 million, and that represents the amount of money that will be returned, that was not committed, that was left, and will be returned to the research funds for future allocation. And I kind of continue here on what the 22-23 proposed budget will look like. I'll include some of the numbers we just saw in the charts for those. But first, I wanted to talk about the major drivers for the 22-23. We anticipate having 19 GWG reviews in a 12-month period, not counting the 3 that are from the 21-22 fiscal year that have bled over. We will continue funding our core programs, Distran and CLIN pillars, and the shared labs and manufacturing concepts will be presented in 22-23. So we do anticipate fluctuations always in the number of grantees that we get, but we have a formula we use for budgeting for the research programs. So with regards to the clinical budget, we budget at the maximum number of awards funded per year. The reason we do that is because of the nature of those grants and the time sensitivity of those grants. So for 22-23, we're proposing $169 million. And you will see for TRAN, it's a little bit different. Our methodology there is to budget according to the average number of grants. This is based on the data provided by our team on performance to date. For Discovery, we're proposing $106 million. We know that DISC 0 is a new program that we're adding in 22-23. And again, this category, we budget according to the average number of awards funded. For education, we had a large amount budgeted in 21-22. So in 22-23, we're continuing the conference grant funding. Education category is also one that we budget at max award funded historically. Finally, in the last category of infrastructure, we're proposing $80 million, and the concepts for the shared labs and manufacturing networks will be presented in 22-23. So just to summarize those categories in a chart, here we show what the board had approved in 21-22, what we anticipate spending in terms of estimated to finish, which is $370 million from the prior chart that I had already gone over, and then the proposed budget of $426.7 million for 22-23. The difference between what we're proposing and the estimated to finish is $56.7 million. And this does include and I do want to point out for infrastructure in the current year, it was Alpha Clinics. In the budget year that we're proposing, it's shared labs and the manufacturing network. They're the same dollar amount, but we wanted to make sure that we differentiated between the two. So in summary, we're requesting $426.7 million in research. That does conclude my presentation with regards to the research grants. I'm happy to take questions if you have any, or go back to any slides.
Thank you, Pune. As before with the administrative budget, this budget was thoroughly vetted by the Science Subcommittee chaired by Dr. Goldstein. Do I hear a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, Maria, did you get that? Okay.
I believe it was Haifa and Kim, correct? It was Haifa and Kim.
Not me. Thank you.
I'm sorry, who was the second?
The phone doesn't work.
Haifa.
It was George and Haifa. So George was the first, Haifa was the second. Thank you.
Okay, questions or comments from members of the board? Steve.
So this is all the comments that I made previously, a question I asked Maria Milan, and it goes to the $1.5 billion that's dedicated to dealing with the CNS and brain issues. So what I would like to see, but it's, I don't know if other members support this or not, but on an ongoing basis, a breakout of the actual amount of funds that we're spending, at least on an annual basis, against this $1.5 billion. So that we know how we're tracking with regard to that particular area. I'm sure that's not something that's not that difficult to do, but I think it would be helpful for this board to understand how we're doing with regard to what I think is a pretty important and vital area that we've been put to supporting with a large amount of money.
Thank you, Steve. We do track that and we have the numbers. I don't know if they've been, we didn't put it in any of the presentations today, so we usually go through an internal QC and double checks. We do have that information. We'll bring it to an upcoming meeting. Dr. Canetta-Villas may already have kind of a sense of where that is today. What we've been doing internally is checking on that, and it really does look like we're on track in terms of proportion of the amounts. But as you said, we also want to identify where there are specific programs geared toward that. So any numbers we have is the aggregate investment into this from Prop 14 dollars into CNS programs that come through individually through the program announcements. And we do have that information that we will be able to share. And in fact, in July, we'll be able to give just kind of, a more, I'll be able to, in the President's report, give a little bit more of an update, and I will bring what numbers we have at that time.
Yeah, so Maria, I'm not suggesting, I don't want to make a big exercise of this, but at least on an annual basis, perhaps, like in a presentation like this, when we're reviewing the past year's budget and kind of what got spent, maybe there's another line item amongst all that for this $1.5 billion bucket that's plugged in at that point. It's just, I think we have some responsibility to kind of keep track of how money gets spent when, the proposition dictates that money is dedicated in a particular area.
Absolutely, yes. And our finance team, Panay, does have that on her budget tracking. She has it by categories of the Prop 14 indicated allocations. So we have that all in our internal accounting system. We'll make sure that that's something that can be provided as a reference for these presentations as well.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Christina?
Thanks, JT, and thanks for all the presentations. I would like to echo what Steve was just saying. I would also like to see the breakdown as it comes to CNS programs in the various pillars, so that we know whether there is, for example, healthy pipeline heading towards the clinic, or whether there is a need for RFAs or similar things specifically targeted to CNS as suggested by the Prop 14. I think it's important for the board to be mindful, as Steve noted, of this commitment that we did make to the voters, and make sure that we're actively on top of it and have really a robust and world-class CNS portfolio, which I suspect we do, but formally show that that's indeed the case.
Thank you, Dr. Wari. We will, as a team, get something together, and you'll have a chance to see that at an upcoming meeting. I wanted to just remind everybody, we literally just launched this strategic plan in January. But as you know, the proposition was passed in December. So we do have a year and a half worth of data in terms of what's come in, since Prop 14 has been passed. So I think we'll have a chance to have an update. We have an annual report that's being right now finalized by the team, and we will have reports in that annual report as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. Other questions or comments from members of the board? Any comments from members of the public? Seeing, hearing none, Maria, will you please call the roll?
Haifa Abdullah,
Yes.
Mohammed Abusalam,
Yes.
Kim Barrett,
Yes.
Dan Bernal,
Yes.
George Blumenthal,
Yes.
Michael Botchin,
Yes.
Linda Boxer,
Yes.
Leander Clark Harvey,
Yes.
Isabel Dudon, Mark Fisher Colbury,
Yes.
Fred Fisher,
Yes.
Elena Flowers,
Yes.
Judy Gasson,
Yes.
Larry Goldstein,
Yes.
David Higgins,
Yes.
Steve Julesgaard,
Yes.
Rich Lahara,
Yes.
Pat Levitt,
Yes.
David Lowe,
Yes.
Linda Malkus,
Yes.
Shlomo Melmed,
Yes.
Christine Miskowski, Laura Miller Rogan,
Yes.
Adriana Padilla, Joe Panetta, Al Roulette,
Yes.
Marvin Southard,
Yes.
Michael Stamos,
Yes.
Jonathan Thomas,
Yes.
Art Torres,
Aye.
Christina Vori.
Yes.
The motion carries.
Thank you, Maria. We're going to go next to action item number 8,
Yeah, who didn't?
which
Sorry
is,
about that.
yeah, are you missing a vote there?
Keith Yamamoto. We didn't call Keith. Sorry about that, Keith.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Action item number 8, consideration of governance subcommittee items. This discussion is going to be led by Judy Gasson. And Dr. Gasson and Dr. Vori have been the very busy subcommittee chair people for this subcommittee. So the first item for discussion and vote here is chair and vice chair role, qualifications, and percent effort. Judy.
Thank you, Chairman Thomas. And we have a PowerPoint presentation that was prepared by James. Thanks to all of the board members who answered the survey and gave us responses to these questions. If I could have the next slide, please. There are a number of statutory duties of the chair that are laid out in Prop 14, and they include managing the board's agenda, supervising the public accountability requirements, bond financing and cash flow plans, interfacing with the legislature, the Congress, healthcare, and the public, leveraging financial opportunities, and leading negotiations for intellectual property policies and contract terms. May I have the next slide, please? In addition, the chair serves as a member of the Grants Working Group, the Standards Working Group, Facilities Working Group, Affordability and Accessibility Working Group, and the California Stem Cell Research and Cures Finance Committee. So this is the responsibilities that are laid out in Prop 14. May I have the next slide? The statutory duties of the vice chair are a bit less specific. They are to assist the chair in carrying out the chair's duties. The vice chair, along with the chair, is responsible for nominating members of the Accessibility and Affordability Working Group to the board, and the vice chair serves as a member of the AAWG. Next slide. So these are the recommendations for the role, the percent effort, and the desired attributes for the chair that came from the survey of the board that was conducted, I think, back in May. The consensus was as follows. Recommend that the partnership model to perform the statutory duties of the chair with clearly delineated roles and responsibilities for the chair, vice chair, and president. This model is currently in effect and appears to be working well. We recommended approximately 80% time commitment for the chair and recommended the following attributes and skills be considered in evaluating potential candidates for the chair: integrity, passion, and enthusiasm for the mission, leadership and decisiveness, effective communicator, collaborative and inclusive, and respect for leadership and staff, and intellect and experience. May I have the next slide, please? The recommended role, percent effort, and desired attributes for the vice chair are listed on this slide. The consensus of the subcommittee, which was unanimous regarding the discussion of the vice chair, was as follows. We recommended a commitment of 50 to 80% time, and it'll become clear, I think, in a moment why that's kind of a wide range. In addition to supporting the chair and carrying out the chair's statutory duties, the subcommittee also recommended that the vice chair assume responsibility for serving as the chair of the Affordability and Accessibility Working Group if the vice chair has relative experience, and to also assume the responsibility for oversight of government relations, or if the vice chair has relevant experience, assume primary responsibility for government relations. We recommend the following attributes and skills, which are very similar to the chair: integrity, passion, and enthusiasm for the mission, collaborative and inclusive, respect for leadership and staff, strong and effective patient advocate. May I have the next slide, please? Additional items that came up in the discussion of the governance subcommittee were: there's a general consensus among the subcommittee members that things are working well with the current structure, and therefore there is no mandate for change. There's also broad agreement that the future sustainability of CIRM, including beyond the funding period provided by Prop 14, is a high priority for the chair, the vice chair, and the president. And finally, the chair and the vice chair, along with all the board members, continue to lead robust oversight role. I think that's the last slide, is whether there are any questions from members of the board.
Okay, thank you, Judy. And again, this presentation is the work product of a lot of work by this subcommittee. So great thanks to everybody on it, and particularly the co-chairs, Judy and Christina. So I'm going to ask for a motion here in a second, but because there are so many of us on the call and it's not always easy to identify, when you say I move or whatever, if you could just state who's saying that so we can pick it up. So do we hear a motion to approve this set of guidelines with respect to the chair and vice chair?
So moved, and it's Mohammed.
Thank you, Mohammed. Is there a second?
Seconded, Michael Samos.
Thank you, Michael. Questions or comments from members of the board on this motion?
Just a question for Judy. Did a discussion occur about the degree qualifications?
It did not. And we went by the survey results. And my recollection is that if there was a degree requirement, it was down toward the bottom. So
Okay.
no, it did not come up, Shlomo. Thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions or comments from members of the board? Seeing or hearing none, comments from members of the public? Seeing or hearing none there as well. Maria, will you please call the roll?
Yes. Haifa Abdullah,
Yes.
Mohammed Abuslam,
Yes.
Kim Barrett,
Yes.
Dan Bernal, George Blumenthal,
Yes.
Michael Botchin,
Yes.
Linda Boxer,
Yes.
Leander Clark Harvey,
Yes.
Mark Fisher Colbury,
Yes.
Fred Fisher, Elena Flowers,
Yes.
Judy Gasson,
Yes.
David Higgins,
Yes.
Steve Julesgard,
Yes.
Rich Lahara,
Yes.
Pat Levitt,
Yes.
David Lowe,
Yes.
Linda Malkus,
Yes.
Shlomo Mahmoud,
Yes.
Lauren Miller Rogan,
Yes.
Adriana Padilla, Michael Stamos,
Yes.
Marvin Southard,
Yes.
Jonathan Thomas,
Yes.
Art Torres,
Aye.
Christina Vori,
Yes.
Keith Yamamoto.
Yes.
The motion carries.
Thank you, Maria. One other item on the governance subcommittee list, which is performance management review forms for the president and CEO. Dr. Gass.
So we worked with Tammy Butner on this as a consultant, and I think we're going to put the forms up on the screen here in a moment. And basically what the governance committee approved was a very similar set of criteria for evaluation as had existed previously. But as we scroll down, you'll see that we were able to streamline the survey so that it wasn't quite as repetitive. So these are the potential responses. And if we keep scrolling down, in each case, you can see that we've sort of collapsed attributes that were in different sections, but that we felt were somewhat redundant into more concise categories. And in each case, a numerical score can be attributed along with any additional comments. The surveys will be, or the performance evaluations will be given out to the members of the board as well as the direct reports. The results will be kept confidential and they will be summarized. And then a summary will be provided to the governance committee and to the board, and a conversation will be had with the individuals whose performance is being evaluated, in this case, the president and CEO. So you've had a chance to look at this. Tammy, do you want to add anything to what I just said?
No, I think you did great. We did add that one little section at the beginning just to identify how often the interaction is with the president. We thought that was important since some of you have more, some of you have less. But other than that, I think you covered it well.
Thank you, Tammy. I think that pretty much covers it, Chairman Thomas. I don't see any hands raised.
Thank you, Judy. So do we have a motion to approve this form?
George Blumenthal, I so move.
Thank you, George. Your second?
Marv Southern, second.
Thank you, Marv. Questions or comments from members of the board? Comments from members of the public? Seeing none, just like to thank Tammy for your help. And again, Judy and Christina and members of the subcommittee. I think this is an excellent form as revised and will serve as the model going forward. With that, Maria, will you please call the roll?
Haifa Abdullah,
Yes.
Muhammad Abuslam,
Yes.
Kim Barrett,
Yes.
Dan Bernal,
Yes.
George Blumenthal,
Yes.
Michael Botchin,
Yes.
Linda Boxer,
Yes.
Leander Clark Harvey,
Yes.
Mark Fisher Colbury,
Yes.
Fred Fisher,
Yes.
Elena Flowers,
Yes.
Judy Gasson,
Yes.
Larry Goldstein,
Yes.
David Higgins,
Yes.
Steve Julesgard,
Yes.
Rich Lahara,
Yes.
Pat Levitt,
Yes.
David Lowe,
Yes.
Linda Malkus,
Yes.
Shlomo Melmed,
Yes.
Lauren Miller Rogan,
Yes.
Adriana Padilla, Joe Panetta,
She's on her treadmill about the board.
Al Rolette, Marvin Southard.
Yes.
Al, are you back online? Michael Stamos, Jonathan Thomas,
Yes.
Art Torres,
Aye.
Christina Vori,
Yes.
Keith Yamamoto.
Yes.
I'm going to go back and see if Al is back. Al, are you back on the line? Okay. The motion carries.
Thank you, Maria. Beth, are you holding up okay?
I'm fine, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So we're going to go continuing to get some of these voting items out of the way here. Quickly go through the consent calendar. Item number 5, consideration of the minutes for the March, April, and May meetings. Do we hear a motion to approve?
So moved. Second, Marv
Thank
Southern.
you. Thank you. So moved by Dan, seconded by Marv. Any questions or comments from members of the board on this item? Any comments from members of the public? Okay, this is a consent item, so we still need to have a vote, Maria.
Yes.
So the consent, the order by which that would happen is you would ask if anybody wanted to remove anything from the consent calendar, and if not, you would vote for all 3 as part of the consent.
Okay, so we will, thank you, exactly what I was thinking. Okay, so let's, anybody want to remove this item? Hearing none, what we will go through the other 2.
Not just
Yeah, sorry.
JT. I'm gonna let Kevin weigh in here now with the process.
Okay.
So, Mr. Chairman, being the Roberts Rules Police, we need to officially withdraw the motion from the mover and permission from the second before we proceed with the rest of the consent calendar.
Oh, so we need a motion on all 3 is what you're saying at the end?
Yes. If you
Okay.
plan on taking them all together, we just need to withdraw the pending
Okay.
motion made by
Okay.
Dan Bernal.
Thank
and,
you.
move the
Let's,
second.
is that acceptable to Dan and Marv?
I withdraw my previous motion and move the consent calendar.
Thank you.
Good move.
Okay, thank you, gentlemen. On to item number 9 or 6 rather, consideration of communications subcommittee mission statement, and Ms. Duron is going to have a presentation. Isabel?
JT, that's for later. That's under the discussion. So right now we're still just taking over the consent calendar. So the motion would just be to approve everything on the consent calendar, not each one individually.
Okay, okay. All right, so there are 3 items on the consent calendar. That's number 2. Number 3 is consideration of new appointments to the GWG, which Gil has put, there's materials in your packet on that. Okay, so now do I hear a motion to?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Senator. Is there a second? Is
Jesus.
there a second?
Second, Marv.
Second, this is Al Willett.
Okay, I think Marv beat Al to the punch there. Thank both of you. Is there any discussion or questions by members of the board on this motion? Any comments from the public? Maria, will you please call the roll?
Haif Abdullah,
Yes.
Mohammed Abuslam,
Yes.
Kim Barrett,
Yes.
Dan Bernal,
Aye.
George Blumenthal,
Yes.
Michael Botchin,
Yes.
Linda Boxer,
Yes.
Leander Clark Harvey,
Yes.
Fred Fisher,
Yes.
Elena Flowers,
Yes.
Mark Fisher Colbury,
Yes.
Judy Gasson,
Yes.
Larry Goldstein,
Yes.
David Higgins,
Yes.
Steve Julesgard,
Yes.
Rich Lahara,
Yes.
Pat Levitt,
Yes.
David Lowe,
Yes.
Linda Malkus,
Yes.
Shlomo Melmed,
Yes.
Lauren Miller Rogan,
Yes.
Al Rolette,
Yes.
Marvin Southard,
Yes.
Michael Stamos,
Yes.
Jonathan Thomas,
Yes.
Art Torres,
Aye.
Christina Vori,
Yes.
Keith Yamamoto.
Yes.
The motion carries.
Thank you, Maria. We're going to jump now to item 11, consideration of CIRM conflict of interest code section 100000. Presentation from Ben.
Good morning, board members. For your consideration today is CIRM's conflict of interest policy section 100000. This draft, which covers disclosure categories for CIRM employees, was unanimously approved by the CIRM board prior to a public comment period at the end of last year. The California Office of Administrative Law published a notice on the register, and CIRM did not receive any public comments during the 45-day comment period. CIRM is therefore asking the board for final approval for submission to the FPPC. And that's it. And
Thank you,
I will
Ben.
take any questions.
Thank you for your exceptionally succinct presentation. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved, Leandra Clark Harvey.
Thank you, Leandra. Second.
Elena, second.
Thank you, Elena. Questions or comments from members of the board? Questions or comments from members of the public? Hearing none. Maria, will you please call, was that a, did I hear something? Somebody have a question? No.
I don't think so.
Okay. Maria, will you please call the roll?
Haif Abdullah,
Yes.
Mohammed Abu Salam,
Yes.
Kim Barrett,
Yes.
George Blumenthal,
Yes.
Dan Bernal,
Yes.
Michael Botchin,
Yes.
Linda Boxer,
Yes.
Leandra Clark Harvey,
Yes.
Mark Fisher Colbury,
Yes.
Fred Fisher,
Yes.
Elena Flowers,
Yes.
Judy Gasson,
Yes.
Larry Goldstein,
Yes.
David Higgins,
Yes.
Steve Julesgard,
Yes.
Rich Lahara,
Yes.
Pat Levitt,
Yes.
David Lowe,
Yes.
Linda Malkus,
Yes.
Shlomo Melmed,
Yes.
Lauren Miller Rogan,
Yes.
Al Rolette,
Yes.
Marvin Southard,
Yes.
Michael Stamos,
Yes.
Jonathan Thomas,
Yes.
Art Torres,
Aye.
Christina Vori,
Yes.
Keith Yamamoto.
Yes.
The motion carries.
Thank you, Maria. One more action item to go. Item 12, consideration of change to the application review subcommittee bylaws to expand approval authorization. Kevin Marks will present. Kevin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As the board is aware, and as explained in the memorandum that was attached to the agenda, the ICOC has the ultimate authority to perform the functions of making final decisions on any grants awards through Article 5 of the board bylaws. The board has delegated that decision-making authority for research award recommendations arising from the grants working group to the application review subcommittee. However, there's no current delegation that exists with respect to the facilities working group and the newly created affordability and accessibility working group, the AAWG. So to achieve consistency across the organization, we're recommending that we modify Article 5, Section 5 of the bylaws to expand the grant award approval process and give the authority to the the ARS to have grant approval authority over recommendations coming out of the facilities working group and the AAWG.
Thank you, Kevin. Do we hear a motion to approve?
So moved.
Moved by Senator Torres. Is there a second?
Marv, second.
I think that was Marv again on the second. Thank you. Questions or comments from members of the board? Questions or comments from members of the public? Larry, you've got your hand up, Larry.
Yeah, I'm just curious as to why the AAWG is included for approval by the ARS rather than by the entire board. I guess my anticipation would be that there are many fewer conflicts of interest coming through the AAWG, given the very different nature of the kinds of grants it's going to support. So I guess, what's the logic to limit it to the ARS as opposed to the entire board?
Mr. Chairman, I don't know if you would like me to address it, or
Yes, please.
Okay, so the idea behind the recommendation is it's the award of funds. When considering and creating the application review subcommittee, the board wanted that fund approval authority to rest with the ARS as a smaller subcommittee. So based on that same philosophy, we're relying upon that for this recommendation.
Okay. Thank you, Kevin. Other questions or comments? Steve.
Yes, Kevin, I'm kind of left hanging here. So can you give me an example of funding, the kind of funding you're talking about that would create this conflict issue?
Sorry, Steve, I'm a little confused on the conflict issue.
That would be a conflict for anybody other than the ARS. So what kind of funding are you talking about that suggests that we shouldn't involve the whole ICOC, but only the ARS? Can you provide me an example that the AAWG would somehow be involved with regard to funding that would recuse everybody but the ARS?
Sorry, I'm sorry for the dumbfounded look, and I will rely upon others with probably a longer history in the organization that may be able to comment a bit more. And I do foresee, for example, if you look at the facilities working group and starting there, any funding requests for facility modifications that may rest with either the alpha clinics or the community care centers of interest, which may be affiliated with some of our member institutions from board members. That's a potential situation. Likewise, with the AAWG, when we're looking at patient assistance programs for approval of funds that would allow patients in institution-funded clinical trials to be able to more easily accessible clinical trials, there's a potential for conflicts that, as you know, many of our clinical trials are done in academic institutions for which we have board member representation.
I'm just trying to think through the process by which this gets handled. Let me think about that for a moment. I see that Larry has a question.
Well, so I completely agree that for the facilities working group, the conflict of interests are substantial and obvious for those of us who have ties to potential grant recipient organizations from the facilities standpoint. I'm less persuaded about that for the AAWG. For example, the Patient Assistance Fund, I think it's rather unlikely that those funds would be administered by our medical centers. I think they would be managed in some way by independent organizations or by community care centers, for example. I just wonder whether we want to get a little bit of experience with the AAWG funding proposals before we disqualify a large segment of the board from providing input and thought about these.
Okay, we're going to go, Fred was next and then back to Steve.
And just to respond to what Larry said, if there were a patient assistance fund for people with ALS to participate in clinical trials or whatever ultimately is covered by that, it could be very likely that the organization that I'm the CEO of, which is the largest ALS serving organization in the country, could or should end up administering that, so that I could see a conflict there in that regard, not necessarily with the patients who receive those funds, but as a potential organization that would be an appropriate entity to distribute them on behalf of Serm. Unless I missed the point of your comment, Larry, that just occurred to me.
But Fred, aren't you a member of the ARS? So the conflict is backwards from our standard conflict problems.
Yes, I don't know that I'm on a bunch of different groups. So, but yeah, I am.
Yeah, that's a fair point, Larry. Steve.
Larry's absolutely right. So this is a very different animal. Fred, you are a member of the ARS, but you would have a conflict of interest for other reasons. You'd have to recuse yourself from voting in the situation that you just mentioned, but you would be the only person in that circumstance to recuse yourself. The problem we've got is that we've got so many academic and research center representatives on the ICOC that the old historical notion is that everybody would pat everybody else on the back in terms of approving things, and that's kind of how we got to the ARS. I'm with Larry. I don't at this point exactly see the nature of the conflict, and I don't like to exclude people from being involved in decisions unless it's really necessary to do so. So I like Larry's recommendation of let's get some on the ground experience with this with regard to the AWG. And if we find that we have conflicts of interest, then we can address it at that point. But to just do it pro tanto is for me, I think, a little extreme.
Well, as the chair of the working group, this is Arcturus, as the chair of the working group, I would agree with Larry and with Steve. I think that we need to get a little more clarity and experience under our belt before we proceed along these lines.
Hey, Judy, you have your hand raised.
I think it's been a good discussion, and I just want to support the position of Larry and Steve and Art.
Okay, thank you. Other questions or comments from members of the board?
I also, this is Linda Malkus, I agree with, I thought this was a very, very good discussion. And I think the idea of let's see how this goes before we make any big decision.
Okay, so it sounds like what we have here is a consensus, having not voted on the motion, but a consensus that the motion as stated is not the general will of the board, and that Kevin, given that, could you describe how we should proceed on this? I think the facilities working group is the applicability of this motion is evidence, but how shall we proceed from here if we want to change the motion as stated?
I honestly think it's simpler, since Senator Torres was the moving party on the motion, to have him withdraw the motion with permission of the second and reintroduce a motion, simply to have the any decisions or recommendations coming out of the facilities working group to go to the ARS for the time being.
That's fine by me.
Okay, and I believe Marv, you were the second. Is that
consent granted?
Okay, thank you. Okay, so we have a new motion here, which is to to just have this apply strictly to the facilities working group and have decisions for funding made by it going to the ARS. Questions or comments from members of the board? Questions or comments from members of the public? Hearing none, Maria, will you please call the roll?
We don't.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman, we had a stated motion by you, but we did not have a movement and a second.
I thought Senator, okay.
I
Senator,
removed my motion and now I substitute it with a more relevant motion and ask for a second.
thank you.
Second,
Okay, moved and seconded. Any further questions or comments?
Mr. Chairman, I didn't hear who the second was.
Marv Southard.
I think it was Michael Stamos.
Oh, it was Michael. Okay, yeah, it's tough to see it. Again, if you move or second, if you just identify yourself, thank you. Okay, Maria, will you please call the roll?
Sure. Haif Abdullah,
Any
Yes.
public input? Public?
Okay, is there any public input on the restated motion? Hearing none. Maria, will you please call the roll?
Haif Abdullah,
Yes.
Mohammed Abuslam,
Yes.
Kim Barrett,
Yes.
Dan Bernal,
Aye.
George Blumenthal,
Yes.
Michael Botchin,
Aye.
Linda Boxer,
Yes.
Leander Clark Harvey,
Yes.
Isabel Dudon, Mark Fisher Colby,
Yes.
Fred Fisher,
Yes.
Elena Flowers,
Yes.
Judy Gasson,
Yes.
Larry Goldstein,
Yes.
David Higgins,
Yes.
Steve Julesgard,
Yes.
Rich Lahara,
Yes.
Pat Levitt,
Yes.
David Lowe,
Yes.
Linda Malkus,
Yes.
Shlomo Mahmed,
Yes.
Lauren Miller Rogan,
Yes.
Al Roulette,
Aye.
Marvin Southard,
Yes.
Michael Stamos,
Yes.
Jonathan Thomas,
Yes.
Art Torres,
Aye.
Christina Vori,
Yes.
Keith Yamamoto.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, thank you. We've got through all of the action items, so thank you, everybody, underscoring the importance of doing everything we can to maintain quorum, as we just did through that. So we're going to take a short 5-minute break to give Beth a breather, and then we'll resume back with Sham on his presentation and continuation of the president's report. So 5-minute break, please. Okay, if we could resume here, everybody. Can we get our screen back here, please? Thank you. Let's return to the president's report and go to Sean.
Thank you, Chairman Thomas. It's my pleasure to update the board today on some business development items. So as part of this presentation, I'll be updating a few of the numbers that we track and also providing our expanded vision on the Industry Alliance program. So let me just put the presentation up real quick. Hope everybody can see this. So as Dr. Milan indicated, our funding opportunity is designed to be progressive in nature to fund from one stage to the next, the development of therapies. So what they fundamentally do is that they bridge the translational valley of death, which extends generally from the early discovery of a single product candidate through clinical proof of concept in a phase 1 or phase 2 clinical trial. And so our funding opportunities allow projects to progress from one stage to the next. So from discovery to translation to clinical. Dr. Milan gave an example of the Neurona therapeutics. I have a couple more here to just demonstrate how both academic institutions as well as a combination of academic institutions and companies have leveraged our funding in progressive awards to extend their, to accelerate the progression of their therapies. So for example, at UC Davis, Dr. Farmer and the team have progressed their in utero stem cell therapy for spina bifida from the translational stage of the PC1 award through IND enabling activities to CLIN1 into a phase 1 clinical trial that was recently approved by the board for CLIN2. Similarly, Dr. Henry Klassen and the UC Irvine team have leveraged several awards over the course of many years to progress their cell therapy of retinitis pigmentosa. So initially, this was a basic discovery award, and that went into a clinical trial award, upon which time a company was launched called JSite, and JSite came back and actually secured a couple of CLIN2 grants to progress the therapy into late-stage clinical trials, and recently had a partnership with Santen Pharmaceuticals to get to commercialization for this therapy. So as CIRM helps programs progress through the different stages of development, this allows those programs to secure industry partnerships. And so today I'll update some of those numbers. For a few years now, we've been tracking the amount of industry investments going into CIRM-funded projects. This includes things such as licensing, acquisitions, mergers, venture capital investments, companies going public. All of that is generally captured whenever CIRM money is flowed into a program. We only track these numbers after the first CIRM dollars have been committed. So it's everything after CIRM funding. And so to date, we've tracked at least $23.4 billion of investments from the industry into CIRM funded projects. We also track the number of companies that have spun out from CIRM funding of academic projects. So here, CIRM funding contributed to some sort of discovery, which then helped enable a spin out of that company. And we've tracked about 50 companies that have been spun out thanks to CIRM funding of academic projects. And many of these companies have been based in California. So to give you an idea as to types of types of partnering events that we track, I have a few examples here from recent events. So as you may recall, Dr. Matt Porteous and the Stanford team had used CIRM funding to advance the CRISPR gene therapy for sickle cell disease through IND enabling activities and the filing of the IND. Upon the filing of that IND, the company had launched called Graphite Bio, and that company raised $195.7 million in venture funding over the last couple of years. And in 2021, it had one of the largest IPOs in the CIRM universe of $273.7 million. And all that money has gone toward launching that clinical trial in multiple sites. Similarly, CIRM funding to Dr. Jean Loring at the Scripps Institute led to the discovery of an autologous iPSC-derived cell therapy for Parkinson's disease. This particular technology was then licensed to a company called Aspen Neuroscience, which Dr. Loring helped co-found and launch. And that company recently raised a large venture round, bringing its total venture funding to $220 million as it advances that candidate to clinical trials. Now, we've all seen the news over the last few months that the biotech industry is suffering from reduced investor interest. And so I'm going to give you a background on that, and then how we believe that CIRM's funding opportunities can support the industry going forward. So the Alliance for Regenerative Medicine puts out sector reports every year that track regenerative medicine financing. And the last couple of years, it's been setting records in terms of the amount of venture capital, as well as initial public offerings for regenerative medicine companies. So in particular, 2021 was a good year for both of those. The amount of venture funding was at record levels, and so was the IPOs. However, there was already some declining public market support in that year for regenerative medicine companies. So if you look at the follow-ons, these are public companies who are now raising additional funds by floating more shares in the market. And that actually was trending downward in 2021 compared to 2020. And this public market sentiment toward regenerative medicine companies and biotechs in general is more accurately and more completely demonstrated by looking at a few charts here. So up on the left here is tracking a couple of the major biotech indices, IBB and XBI, compared to the S&P 500. And as you can see from that chart, which may be a little bit hard to see on the screen, from January 2021 to today, both of these major biotech indices have been underperforming the S&P 500, and that underperformance actually accelerated in 2022 over the last 6 months or so. And that has actually had major impacts that are kind of flowing down through the different levels of financing. So first and foremost, the public market is an important mechanism for raising funds for companies that are either at the late stage of preclinical development or clinical development itself by issuing a public IPO and then having follow-on fundings. So if you look at the chart on the left here, the total biotech IPOs in 2021 were 104, given that that was a really strong year for biotech financing. And 19 of those companies are cell and gene therapy companies, including what I mentioned previously, Graphite Bio and others like Tenaya. In 2022, in the first 6 months, only 14 biotech companies have gone public, and only 2 of those have been cell and gene therapy companies. So that's much lower than what you would anticipate if you're comparing the 2021 numbers. So this has taken away a really critical funding mechanism for these companies that are entering into clinical trials. At the same time, it's also taken away the exit mechanism for private equity investors who can then take their earnings and reinvest in the next stage of emerging companies. And we somewhat see that in the trends on the biotech venture capital financing side. So since 2021, the first quarter of 2021, biotech venture capital financing has been trending slightly downward. And potentially this could increase over this year in terms of the downward trend and the interest from venture capital investments into biotech. So Serm has always supported for-profit companies in its funding mechanisms. So Serm's for-profit awardees range from virtual seed stage startups through pre-revenue small cap public companies. And what I was trying to do here was map out some trends in terms of our core pipeline funding opportunities from discovery through translation through clinical, looking at both pre-2021 and post-2021. And the way I stratified that was looking at our Prop 71 and Prop 14 funding mechanisms. So by way of background, our discovery, translation, and clinical funding opportunities were launched in 2015, 2016 with the tail end of Prop 71 funds. And all 3 of those programs were renewed and relaunched after Prop 14 passed. So if we look at Prop 71 funded clinical programs, there was over 40% of the awardees for Prop 71 clinical programs was for-profit awardees. These were companies of all shapes and sizes, as I mentioned. And over the last year and a half, the number of companies that have received clinical program funding has been lower, but we expect this to increase because of the amount of interest we're seeing from companies, especially particularly renewed interest in certain funding opportunities because of the funding environment. And there are a couple of things that are factoring in here. One of those is the timing of those companies' financing rounds and their next stage of IND filing or clinical trials. So we're expecting that volume to increase over the next few months. But another factor that's playing into this is the ability for those companies to secure investments for the co-funding requirement for CIRM awards. And so we're looking into that more closely as well and how we can help these companies achieve CIRM funding to accelerate their portfolio. Another encouraging trend has been that on the preclinical side, the discovery and translational opportunities, there has been a significant trend toward higher proportion of for-profit awardees in both of those mechanisms, particularly in translational. And this has been sustained through multiple rounds. So for example, the DIS2 round that was approved last week that's not captured in these numbers, the proportion of for-profit awardees is roughly 15%, which kind of matches what you see in that chart here. So overall, what we're seeing is companies are continuing to leverage CIRM funding opportunities. This may increase given the current funding environment, and we're looking at how we can address some of the challenges around co-funding for these programs. So another way that CIRM also brings the industry into the fold, as Dr. Milan mentioned, is through the ways that we work with the Industry Alliance program. So this is a program that was launched a few years ago, and the intent here is to work collaboratively with different industry stakeholders, ranging from investors through large biopharma, in supporting the acceleration of our portfolio of cell and gene therapies and regenerative medicine to market. So after passage of Prop 14, we've expanded this program by bringing in more partners. We've also expanded the scope of this program, and I'm going to walk through some of those with you just now. So as part of the Industry Alliance program, initially this started off as facilitating partnering opportunities between the industry and CIRM awardees. With the passage of Prop 14 and the approval of our new strategic plan, we're expanding this program into other areas that we think can benefit our awardees as well as the community as a whole. So first and foremost, we want to create knowledge sharing opportunities between the IAP partners and the industry and CIRM awardees. And I'll give you a couple of examples of that in the next couple of slides. We also want to provide unique world-class industry resources and technologies to our grantees. So here, moving away from just capital-driven sort of interactions between our awardees and the industry partners toward having the industry partners making their unique proprietary resources more accessible for CIRM grantees to use at the discovery, translation, and clinical stage. And I'll describe that as well as to how we're launching that program. And lastly, we want to incorporate the industry partners into the CIRM California Manufacturing Network. Of course, this is pending concept plan approval from the board later this year. So I'm going to start with the knowledge sharing. So part of this is going forward, we're going to have regularly scheduled events that bring interactions between our grantees and the industry as a whole around certain things like investor days, webinars, and topics of interest, and also working with other partners in the state to have events. So one example of this was a couple of weeks ago, where Dr. Ross Okamura led a panel talking about the selection of optimal cell line for pluripotent stem cell-based therapies and all the work that needs to go into that to pick the right line. And this included participation from our Industry Alliance program members. It included other experts in the field, as well as our CIRM awardees. This webinar is now hosted on our YouTube channel, and it's going to be an important reference for our applicants and awardees going forward. And we're also, as I mentioned, launching our industry resource partner program. And today I'll walk you through some examples of what this entails for us. So here we work with the biopharma industry to enable access for CIRM awardees to unique industry resources. And these are meant to be things that can accelerate the development of the regenerative medicine treatment programs. And examples of these could include starting materials, manufacturing, expert consultation, and CRO services. In all these instances, the industry partner is either making its unique proprietary resource available to CIRM grantees to use, or it's tailoring its offering to meet the requirements of the CIRM awardees, the level of funding that CIRM provides, as well as our award requirements. And we're launching this program initially with our IAP partners, 4 in particular, they're listed on this slide here. So Novo Nordisk and Elevate Bio will provide access to their proprietary cell lines, and Bayer and Resilience will provide access to their manufacturing capabilities and services for our discovery, Clin 1 and Clin 2 stage program. So this is spanning everything from discovery stage research to phase 3 clinical trials. And in all 4 of these instances, these partners look at this as an opportunity to also interact with the project stage support for further partnering opportunities, which could include strategic partnerships, include investments, and licensing opportunities. And so we're excited to continue to expand this resource partner program by bringing in more collaborators into the fold to make them accessible to our grantees. And I should note that in all these instances, we are not endorsing or requiring our awardees or applicants to use any of these resources. It's up to them to decide what is appropriate for their program. So that was the presentation, and I'm happy to take any questions if Chairman Thomas thinks that's appropriate.
Yes, please. Thank you, Sham. See, there's a lot going on in this area. Thank you for your leadership in this. Are there questions or comments for Sham following that presentation. I see Mohammed first and then Larry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Sham. Just along the lines of your last comment about not endorsing these partners, maybe you can comment about how you connect those industry partners with the awardees, or better yet, let me make a recommendation and tell me if this is something along the lines of what you're doing, which is, at least as a first instance, you're making all these partners available and known to all the awardees. So at the end of the day, if a partner picks an awardee to work with them, you don't have other awardees disadvantaged or feel disadvantaged that they do not have that connection. So are you making an opportunity, at least at the beginning, so everybody sees or meets everybody, and then the matchmaking happens organically?
Those are great questions. Thank you. So first and foremost, with respect to raising awareness around these, our goal is to expand on that in the information for applicants page on our website. So we will have the resource partners listed there. Another important element for us is that in terms of the kind of agreements and interactions between those resource partners and our applicants and awardees needs to be consistent across all of those. So there's an easy mechanism for everyone to access that, to get that information that they need. In some instances, if it's appropriate, there'll be a list of those resource partners that our science officers can provide if they're prompted by an applicant or awardee. So that's the way we imagine this working out, and all of that is going to be launched in the next couple of weeks.
So sorry, just as a quick follow-up. So Sham, along those lines, again, if that list of industry partners is actually made available to all awardees, even without them asking, because you don't want the situation where an awardee is not aware of the program and then they don't ask for it and then realize that other awardees are taking advantage of the program. So if we can just be more deliberate in making the list available to them, even if they don't ask.
That's a great suggestion. Thank you. We'll definitely do that in addition to passively listing it in the different resources.
Thank you.
Okay, we've got Larry, then Haifa, then Isabel. Larry.
So I know that what I'm about to ask is a fairly complicated question, so I apologize in advance. So I'm very disappointed by the situation with Orchard, where we're developing what looks like a very effective therapy for kids with no immune system, but where the industry partner bailed for financial reasons, not for lack of effectiveness of the therapy. And that therapy is kind of in limbo here at the moment, as Serm and UCLA and everybody else work to get that solved. So I'm not asking about the Orchard situation, but the issue I'm raising is, should we develop a policy or a plan for how to deal with situations where the industry partner drops what looks like an effective therapy for financial reasons? Because I do anticipate more situations like that in the future, particularly as investment starts to dry up. So the question is, can CIRM develop some standard way of dealing with those situations? And second, a related question, have we eliminated forever the possibility of an academic institution developing a therapy on its own without industry participation? That is, must industry always participate in therapy development that we develop?
Thank you, Dr. Goldstein. Given the complexity of that question, so with respect to the Orchard arrangement and how that kind of plays into this, and the broader question of industry partner dropping support for a particular program, one of the things that is good to note here is that our funding opportunities do allow for academic institutions to continue progression of their candidates pretty late into clinical development. So there was the ability for CIRM to deploy its funding mechanism to support that ADA-skip therapy coming back to UCLA, and that same UCLA program would have the ability to request additional funding by applying to CIRM. And so that's one way that, at least our funding mechanisms themselves can support that. But your broader question, I think, is very relevant. And I'm going to exercise the opportunity to punt that question to my supervisor, Dr. Malat. I think it's a very good question, and it's a very important topic that we do want to address with the board, as we continue to develop our programs. I know this is front and foremost in the mind of our therapeutics team, and our lead on that team, Dr. Abla-Creasy, and I talk about this all the time, and as well as our broader stakeholder group, regarding the complex type of technologies that may have to stay in academia longer, and there may, what is the model development for producing treatments and cures that can be readily available to patients that don't squarely fit into the commercial model, or are riskier for the standard model to bring it out to commercialization. This is a topic that is being addressed by the bespoke gene therapy network that I mentioned in my presentation. It's for that very reason that these types of efforts are being taken up by broad stakeholder groups, including the FDA, because there is and it's very visible to CIRM. There is in progress kind of different ways that we're trying to tackle that problem set in the context of this field being so young. So we're doing an adaptive design as we're trying to bring these programs forward, realizing that it's not going to be, in many cases, easily tech transferable to a standard commercialization path. So I don't have an answer except to say that is a problem statement that's well known. It's something that's anticipated in our strategic plan. It's something that is, the reason that we have joined partnerships such as the Cure Sickle Cell partnership with NHLBI and the Bespoke Gene Therapy Consortium with the FDA, FNIH, and NIH, and other stakeholders in industry. And it is a topic that we will continue to bring to the board in the context of a variety of concepts and programs that will be rolled out in the upcoming 5 years, because it is a very important topic.
Thank you.
Thank you. Haifa, you were next.
Thank you. I think maybe part of my question was answered, but my question was mainly, are there certain rules that govern this type of collaboration with these biotech or companies? Meaning, if they are providing these support for awardees, is there an expectation? Like, what are the expectations in terms of support to them? Like, is there any financial compensation? Is there an expectation that if they provide this support, then they will carry on later as far as the development of the products of the research?
That's a great question. So it could vary depending on the type of resource being provided. One of the things that we are trying to do with each of the resource partners is to make that entirely transparent to the awardees upfront. So part of that is, what's the initial license to do the research, and what sort of licensing arrangements might be needed to get to the clinic and commercialization from that partner? What is a cost structure, and how is that cost structure being tailored toward meeting the needs of the CIRM grantees with the amount of funding that we provide and the amount of funding they might be getting from other resources. So all that is being accounted for within the sort of agreement and the initial interaction between the applicant and awardee with the industry partner, and so that they have an idea as to what they might be getting into if they were to use those services.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Christina, you're next.
Thanks, JT. Just a quick follow-up on the conversation that Larry started, and thanks, Sham and Maria, for your responses. Or maybe a comment that I think there are sort of two possible situations where we run into issues where somebody drops the ball at some point in time for whatever reason. Typically, I guess in a company setting, it could be financial or strategic, market share, what have you reasons. I think what is a good thing here is that with the Orchard situation is that the technology was originally licensed, I gather, from UCLA. So there are some due diligence requirements, I assume, in that contract, as well as then an opportunity to return the program back to UCLA. But it seems that there could be also scenarios where a company holds the IP from the very beginning, especially given the interest that companies now have in the earlier stage Serm grants as well. So it might be very helpful for the IP subcommittee of the ICOC to think about these various scenarios as to how to ensure really the patient perspective when there's a therapy that we know may benefit patients. It's a too small number for companies to really carry it through at the end of the day. Is there a way how we can, maybe working with NIH, the rare disease programs or others, find a home for programs that cannot be naturally returned, for example, to academic organization if they were not party to the actual transaction in the first place? And Steve, I'm sure, has thought this through as well. So glad to see his hand raised now.
Thank you, Christina. Steve?
So Christina, you've hit upon during the course of your soliloquy there, the nut of the matter, which is that these arrangements, in the case of UCLA, as you said, is between UCLA and Orchard. Serm is not involved. It is not Serm's program. It is UCLA's program. And therefore, it's incumbent upon UCLA to put into that agreement they have with Orchard, or whatever obligations they can, they can put into the agreement, they can get Orchard to agree to, et cetera. I think it's very difficult for Serm to get into the middle of that. I can't imagine the people at UCLA, people at Stanford, et cetera, who would want to make this a three-party negotiation and invite Serm in to see what issues Serm might have with the agreement. So these things happen. I mean, they happen between people in industry, between one company and another. At some point, something happens, and the party that's the licensee doesn't wish to proceed, and that can happen for a variety of reasons. And in almost every agreement that I'm aware of between industry participants, there's an escape clause. It may cost some money to escape, or it may not, or whatever, but there's an ability to get out. You can't force people to spend money that they don't believe is being spent in the best interests of the company. It's just, that's a pretty simple notion that goes into these. So that's just my view and observation on this. I'm not sure that really there's a lot we can do except, I do think, and you raised you made a really good point, Christina. I think it's really difficult in a case like the SCID syndrome, where you've got so few patients and such an expensive therapy. I mean, for me, I was actually surprised that Orchard decided to get involved in that, because there's so many issues to be solved. So, it's pricing the product and getting reimbursement for it. It's manufacturing the product, which is done. I believe this is an autologous product, et cetera. I mean, I'm not even sure how this happens, that Don Cohen's methodology gets transferred to other institutions so that they can do the same thing, and how the FDA approves that, assuming that can happen. So I think there are just a lot of unknowns in this that we're going to have to help work through to really understand these, therapies that are involving small numbers of patients. It'll be very expensive, and particularly that are autologous in nature. How is all this going to wind up working out? And this this particular situation is kind of the case in point. I think that will help ultimately help us all figure out how this is going to happen, successfully.
Thank you, Steve. Any other questions or comments for Sean? Okay, thank you again, Sean, for your presentation. Maria, is there a subsequent part of the president's report? I know Sean is going to report on the AAWG with Senator Torres, but that is later in the agenda. Is there anything else that remains in the president's report at this point?
No, that's it, Chairman Thomas. The AWG report, whenever it comes in, it was the final report from the leadership team.
Okay, thanks very much. And thank you to all who participated. Again, the board can see there are many excellent developments, as always, in the past 3 months. And so we greatly appreciate all the hard work by all members of the team and board. So we're going to go now to the discussion items. And the first one is an update on the AAWG, which would Art and Sean. Art, do you want to kick that off?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
I've had difficulty with the computer and the Calistoga library, so it's been very challenging this morning. I just want to give a quick overview and then hand it over to Sean. First of all, I want to thank Sean, Dr. Maria Milan, Maria Bonneville, Pune Simpson, and of course, Jeff Lomax. When I first realized that the Patient Assistance Fund and the money that had been received from the royalties could not be utilized until a trailer bill to the budget was passed and signed by the governor for January 1, 2023, I realized we had to go into action. And there are some people saying, why has it been delayed? Well, quite frankly, we're ahead by 6 months simply because we took the effort with staff to work with the Department of Finance, which is the governor's fiscal arm, and the legislature, and develop a plan that would help us accelerate the process for RFPs and also the work of the working committee of the working group. We've also solicited the advice and counsel and input of all 17 members of the working group, and I want to thank Sean and Maria and others who listened to that input, because it provided a good strategic plan initially as to how we're going to move forward. So the next steps are that we're going to continue to look at what an RFP should look like, and then bring it back to the full working group for approval, and then have that recommendation go before the full board before we issue any RFPs and get the process rolling. So Sean, I'll give it up to you, and you can take it from there. Okay, thank you, Senator. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. Okay, wonderful. Well, Mr. Chairman, Vice Chairman, members of the board, thank you for the opportunity to give you a quick update on the Patient Assistance Program. This program kicked off, as Senator mentioned, back in March, April. So we're moving quite quickly through this initiative. This is in the concept phase. I also have to mention that this is one component of the 5-year strategy when we're addressing accessibility and affordability. So to set the stage, there are a number of barriers that must be overcome to achieve broad, equitable access to regenerative medicines. And I provided this slide in our previous slide decks and presentations to the AAWG, but you can bucket these pretty much into 5 main buckets. Many of you guys on this call are thought leaders in this space, and I think you would agree that these are the buckets that summarize the literature. But those buckets include cultural and social determinants. They include informational to the patient's caregiver with respect to the types of trials that are being run. There are logistical challenges, not only for the industry on the clinical operations side, but also for the patients themselves in terms of participating in these trials. There are financial considerations, particularly for the patients, that has now come up to the forefront, if you will, with respect to ancillary care, ancillary payments, if you will. And then there's also ability-based concepts with respect to participation, who participates, who doesn't, et cetera. So one of the things that we wanted to do right out of the gate is to, with respect to the patient assistance program, is to focus on these 3, the informational, the logistical, as well as the financial barriers with respect to participating in regenerative medicine. So we presented a number of concepts to the AAWG. They provided, as Senator Torres mentioned, some really good feedback, suggestions, recommendations. The conversations were really robust. So here's where we're at. As Senator Torres mentioned, we are starting to move forward with an RFP concept plan. Here are some of the components of that RFP. We will present this to the AAWG on August 2nd. Some of the concepts include a high-touch single point of contact with centrally managed content and information. We're going to focus on financial services, recommendations for financial categories and limits. We will not duplicate costs with respect to other programs that are out there. That's one of the main advantages to this program, is we will centralize this service. Obviously, we're going to tailor towards experienced patient navigators who know the space, not only in rare diseases, but also understand what it's like for a patient to go through that entire clinical trial journey. The recommendation was expertise in rare diseases. Obviously, having a centralized service allows us to enable for data analytics, feedback, how we want to modify the program, what we're doing well, what we can improve on. Certainly sensitive to the cultural adaptation and translation, so we'll have multiple translation services. And then a unique component of this, as I mentioned earlier, we will probably tie this into the alpha clinics and strategy with the community care centers of excellence, which has not been presented yet. We have a concept plan for that will be presented to the AAWG moving forward. So in terms of the timeline, as Senator Torres mentioned, we are ahead of the timeline. This is the 5-year that we presented with the initial 15.6 million investment. We are right now really at the early stage. We're still here at year 1 with respect to determining the model and the gap analysis. Once we do initiate the program, we're looking at scaling to a number of different methodologies that can help patients to year 4. And then of course, year 5, we'll do a final assessment. But through this whole process, again, we will have real-time metrics that allow us to, to assess the program and make any pivots that we see necessary. So moving forward, next plan is to present a proposed concept to AAWG on August 2nd. Based on their guidelines and recommendations, we will then proceed to plan to present to the ICOC on September 29th for a final vote of the concept plan. So with that, that's pretty much a quick summary of the patient support services. And thank you for the opportunity. I'll open it up to any questions.
Thank you, Sean. Are there any questions or comments of Senator Torres or Sean on these 2 sets of remarks?
Sorry. Oh, let's let Larry go. He put his hand up.
Yes, I just lost the screen here. So yes,
Larry.
Yeah, I'm just wondering a little bit, to what extent is assistance for the patients, which is obviously a great thing to do, how is that going to, or will that collide with the problem of companies wanting to charge more for a therapy than can be afforded by this fund? I mean, is there a development of a 5-year financial plan that's going to come with this, or something related?
Well, of course, it has to be, and that's been, and that will continue to be the challenge as we move forward, because on those fronts, I have been dealing with third-party payers for the last 13 years, preparing them to the future when these treatments will become available at a very high cost, but also to recognize the impact that these treatments will have on future costs to insurance companies, to the healthcare system, by reducing the need for a lot of other procedures that right now we have to keep the patient well and to move forward. So I think you're right, Larry. That's always been my intent, was to develop a financial plan that can work, and also that can be realistic in terms of what we need to do. And of course, the challenge of making sure that we educate the third-party payers, and that's going to be the challenge.
Thank you. Isabel, I believe you were second, and then Kim is next after that.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sean, one of the couple of things I like about the plan is the inclusion on the RFPs of community-based organizations, because they're going to be really principal in bridging those gaps between those communities and moving them and supporting them through any clinical trials, et cetera. Secondly, the idea of utilizing the patient navigator as well, but I'm hoping that that includes the community health worker, AKA promotora, who go along with those CBOs and therefore become those navigators from community into systems and to help keep them there. So as you interpret those guidelines, I hope that you're also utilizing that verbiage, because patient navigation has been so interpreted in 30 million ways by different groups that we want to make sure that some of the essential groups we're trying to include are included in those guidelines. They're titled, the name, however you want to do it. But thank you for that. That's very crucial. We're seeing a lot of that even out of the federal government, utilizing the term of CHW, aka promotora, as well as California. So thank you for including that, though. Very critical.
Well, I just might add that I'm happy that Harlan Levine took my invitation to be part of this group. He now heads up, as you well know, the City of Hope, and their navigation system is pretty good, but he admits that he could do better as well. So he's been part and parcel of the input on this issue, as well as other patient advocates within the group.
Great.
Thank you. Kim?
Yeah, I want to definitely second what Isabel said about the involvement of community organizations, but mostly I just wanted to congratulate Senator Torres and Sean for moving this forward so expeditiously, because all of the research that CIRM is supporting will be of little benefit if people can't access it. And this is such a crucial and important part of the mission. So kudos to both of you. And kudos, Kim, to our great governor. Gavin Newsom has been committed to affordability and accessibility for the last 3 years. In fact, part of his budget includes creating an office of affordability, which goes back to Larry's question as well. So we're lucky we had a great ally, which helped facilitate the implementation through the Department of Finance.
Thank you. Other comments, questions from members of the board of Senator Torres or Sean? Yes, Haipa.
I just wanted to make a quick comment. I think this is really great to increase accessibility to patients. And I was just wondering if part of this, will there be a collaboration with other organizations in different areas of diseases, for example, like Leukemia and Lymphoma Society and other established organizations in different areas, in order to increase awareness through these organizations for this program?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's one thing that I did and I continue to do as vice chair of our One Legacy Organ Transplant Foundation, where this kind of program has been so effective by utilizing live donors and donor families to be our ambassadors out there in the field to educate communities. Sometimes communities have been reluctant to participate, for example, in organ transplantation. So the answer is absolutely yes. Great question.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Michael?
Yeah,
sorry if I missed this, but I want to make sure I call out the value and the importance of the over 1,000 FQHCs in California to make sure we give patients access.
Hear, hear.
Okay, any other questions or comments? Okay, thank you, gentlemen. Thank you for all your hard work. Thank you to the 5 board members who were also members of the AAWG, and to the 10 experts who round out the working group itself.
And to our incredible staff that was part of this process as well.
No question. Thank you very much. Okay, on to the next item, which is an update on the Communications Subcommittee. Isabel?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I'm turning to Katie Sharifi of our communications team, is going to help me with the slides. Thank you, Katie. Could you go on to, no, that's my number 1. Well, that's fine. Keeping on top of myself. So I'm going to thank you for giving us the opportunity to share some of the thinking of the communications subcommittee, as well as the work of the comms team, also known as the public outreach team. Katie Sharifi, of course, helping me today and helped me pull this little slideshow together. So thank you very much, Katie. I think it's critically important for the board as a whole to stay informed about what we're doing. But CIRM has to be sure that all of our external investors and stakeholders are aware of
the work that we're doing and how it's impacting the state of California and the people in it. Investors being, in my estimation, the taxpayers of California, and they are also our stakeholders along with the researchers who are funded to advance the science and the discovery. Industry, which partners in those discoveries, our patient advocates who represent the hopes and dreams of those waiting on the answers, and of course, the students to hopefully both embrace science and join the pipeline of our future stem cell researchers. So you're looking at committee, very critical to the work that we're doing. Some of you are new to the board, and we wanted you to see who is sitting on the subcommittee, which was reconstituted this year very robustly. So you'll see not only the subcommittee group, but you'll get to hear more from the public outreach team more frequently, I hope, as they scale up the outreach and they bring back some success stories. And so we want to thank all the board members who joined this committee. It's very critical to have that representation and input. Next slide, please. So just a reminder of the mission statement that we approved in February, more specifically, a couple of lines: take responsibility seriously to educate the people of California about the programs that impact them and to engage and inform them about participating in clinical trials and other scientific endeavors that CIRM supports. So go back to what Haifa was saying about how do we get this information out? Who do we include? That it's very critical that we are very openly communicating very broadly so that people can join in those conversations and in that engagement, but is also crucial to ensure effective, linguistically and culturally appropriate delivery of this information to California's diverse audiences in an inclusive and equitable manner. Next, please. So the communications plan is looking at it from our public outreach team, is considering the plan to be a living document. So, you know, we have to be responsive and responding to short and long-term issues to achieve this mission, making ourselves committed to the goals we have set out to accomplish. So we're engaging on multiple communications fronts, very critical to know to whom we are speaking to and what we're trying to tell them very, very specifically. So not just mainstream, but social media channels, which are even now being monitored for the effectiveness, for the popular usage, by whom and about what. These multiple approaches include the new emphasis on patient advocacy and community outreach strategies. It's among these latter two where I hope we can both improve and increase our effectiveness, identifying those new audiences, being sure that they are diverse and represent not just patients, but the multiple residents of California. We need to increase their knowledge about what CIRM does, what it represents, why and how it might ultimately impact them, a loved one, an acquaintance, the community in which they live and want to support. So we need to make friends with new communities outside our norm. We have a consultant on board who is working to broaden our outreach with those diverse groups. Next, please. So I've seen an uptick on messaging through our LinkedIn page, which is where I live more broadly in terms of social media. And here's an example of a tailored messaging posted on Instagram, where you might find the younger crowd. This is about a Serm Bridges student, Yasmin, who is sharing a post of her journey moving to a new country, earning her master's through the COVID-19 pandemic. It's posts like these that highlight the diversity in science, that reach more women, perhaps in this case, and those diverse audiences, those younger audiences. It might resonate with students who can see that they also might consider pursuing a career in regenerative medicine. So this is more targeted and more personal, and the comms team is upping the game with this kind of messaging. Next, please. So from what I know of my years in media, it is stories that capture people's attention and imagination. And the plan is to be more microscopic in that messaging, to reach specific communities, leveraging existing relationships, and of course, expanding and exploring those new partnerships through CBOs, particularly those from vulnerable, unreached communities. We continue the conversations with our existing contacts around regenerative medicine research to understand and bring relevant information to communities based on what they need to know from us. We're exploring, for instance, a pilot program in either Fresno or Riverside, where we partner with CBOs in the area with strong ties to those underserved populations to launch a what is regenerative medicine campaign. Very basic, but oftentimes where you exactly need to start. And just yesterday, in examples of immediate efforts, the comms team had a presence at the Pride Parade yesterday. I know Maria was talking earlier about being at the various scientific meetings where our booth is a hit. And I'm going to ask our team to say if they can give us a few words, Esteban or Katie, about how that went at the Pride Parade yesterday.
I believe I'm not sure Esteban is on. Okay. I'm not sure Katie joined, but Kevin is on, and he was there yesterday. He sort of got us into the parade, so I'm sure he can give you some updates on that.
Absolutely, Kevin.
Thanks. I think it was a huge hit. You know, having the reconstitution now of the San Francisco Pride Parade and Serm having an outward presence there, I think was a good motivating event for everyone involved. Have that feeling and freedom of expression by the participants in the parade and by the audience participants, and it gave us the opportunity to reach and send our message of how we impact healthcare and potentially healthcare delivery in the LGBTQ+ community. So it was a really good effort too to get our employees out there. So expand community outreach just beyond those that are designated with those titles, and recognize that employees throughout the organization have this opportunity to really spread the good message of the great work that we do as an organization. So as a whole, it was a tremendous plus to be involved with that.
And that's excellent to hear, Kevin. I think that perhaps you might even extend the invitation to some of these meetings, as we saw in the scientific meetings, to some of the board members who might live in those geographic areas to see who might want to attend, might want to take in what's going on, but also be able to represent the board, of course, and Serm. So keep us in mind when you do these kinds of things, because I said, oh, I would like to do that. I'd like to go there. So anyway, thank you very much for that. I appreciate that. Sorry, I asked for folks who weren't in the room. I can't see the Hollywood squares. Also, we're planning an education-specific event with African-American churches in the LA area that supported Serm during the campaign. So there again, if any of the board members wish to participate in some of that ongoing specific event kind of work, I think it's really critical to have us there at those tables as well. So I also recommend, for instance, that in September we connect with the Mexican independence events around the state. This is a very huge opportunity for us to put a face on in front of this community as well. And finally, to close, I invite the board to send us the names of CBOs that you work with or you know of, as well as communities and groups you think we should reach out to, simply as Haifa mentioned, the Lymphoma Society, Leukemia Lymphoma Society, and others. I just, we each individually know a lot more folk that we think need to be at these tables. And so we'd appreciate your input. Also, we hope to have more frequent updates to you, the board. I've been pushing for a board-directed e-newsletter to keep you more engaged, but of course that puts a little more work on the table of our comms team. But I'm nudging to see what we can get, and we'll keep you updated, of course, at a couple of the board meetings as well. So thanks, Katie, for your help. And can I get some questions? Hopefully, since I'm not sure who else is here, Kevin or Esteban or Katie might be able to answer if I can't, or Maria, who's always there, Maria Bonneville. Any questions, anybody? Comments, concerns, additions?
Yeah, Isabel, that's great progress, and I'm really happy to see it. One thing I have worried about over the years is whether our informed consent process does a good enough job of informing some of these underserved communities, or put a different way, as we move more of our clinical trials into underserved communities, are we at risk for those communities telling us in 10 years that we didn't do an adequate job of explaining the risks and rewards of these therapies? So I wonder, I guess I worry that that problem may fall between the cracks of the normal informed consent process in an academic or corporate setting, and the need to really educate such communities about what's involved in these therapeutic experiments.
Larry, absolutely agree with you on that. I've been sitting on a number of other tables where we're actually exploring what does consent look like to which group, and how complex do you make it, and what is the verbiage that you use in order for them to understand it, and how do you portray that consent in? Maybe it's a video. Maybe it's something much more different. I mean, even the process of consenting in is supposed to be private, and yet some people, perhaps in the disabled community and others, where they might want, they need a little bit of assistance. Do you therefore allow assistance in helping somebody else consent in? A lot of good, important questions that need to be raised. Not sure where we should address that. It might even be policy issues, or we may look at best practices. I know that the UCLA and the precision medicine team there are working on some of those video consent-ins that have proven to be very useful in addressing the concerns for the disparate communities, and of course the underserved, and those that are much more, where they become much more culturally relevant to those audiences. So yes, it's a very important question, and I agree with you, just like I said, just to start from the idea of what is regenerative medicine, some of the basics. And I think the consent in, really, we need to get back to the basic on what that looks like. And working obviously with this, maybe even Art, working with your teams about, and in your outreach and with that, those community clinics, how do they begin to speak to the public and get them engaged around those clinical trials and consent? Actually very big question, Larry. I do know it's being asked and some answers being attempted. We might look at what's out there.
Just a suggestion, scientific organizations that I've worked with over the years sometimes will draft model consent forms. And I wonder whether that might be a way for the communication subcommittee, perhaps with the AAWG, to try to address this sort of problem moving forward.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I think I was done, yeah.
I thought that somebody else was trying to follow up with a comment. Yeah, Larry, I agree. And like I said, I think we could look at templates. Well, of course, we'll ask the committee. Maria Bonville could tell us, we'll ask the comms team to maybe take a look at this and where we come in and where our intersection is with this whole process, Larry. But I think that we can look at different models to see if we can at least say, here are some things that we think are moving in the right direction, and recommend them.
Isabel, yes, I'll work internally to figure out exactly how we would work across the organization. This is something that the Standards Working Group looked at years ago when the organization was first starting. So I'll check in with Jeff Lomax as well as Maria and JT and start that process.
Great. Sounds like a time to dust off the cobwebs. So time to get back to it. Anything else? Any other questions?
So I have a question, more of a comment. As you consider the outreach and communication, one of the areas that you might try to focus on is on our intention to increase our activity in the area of mental illness and addiction treatment, because that is really important to underserved communities, particularly right now in this time of the pandemic, when those issues are just blossoming everywhere and there's not currently any good solutions to that. Yeah. So it's an area where there's a lot of money available to do things, but not the personnel And so I think a focus on that might really help engage communities.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Marvin. That issue has just blossomed, sorry to say, as a result of COVID. It really starts, the oppression of COVID, if you will, really started putting the issue of mental health from all the way from adults to children front and center. And you're right, it's having access, knowledge, and the right language speaking personnel to provide the support services. So, and I've seen that. I've seen a lot of grants coming forward from both the NIH and state to start to address some of those issues. So you're right. And so we'll put that one also in the hopper. Thank you.
And then the second thing is a way to start doing that effectively might be to engage specifically with the California Institute of Behavioral Health Solutions, an organization that Al is very familiar with.
Okay.
And they may give us access to communities to do that in ways that make it easy.
Well, and I think Laundra as well.
Correct.
Yeah. There you go. I was waiting. Where is she? Because that's right up your alley, is it not?
Yes, it is. I had my hand raised to concur with what Marvin has raised. I think the time couldn't be better to raise these issues. Not only, at the federal levels, there are a lot of attention, but our state and our governor is committed to behavioral health. And so it would be a travesty to not react in this time and not to prioritize when we have this opportunity.
Well, let's give a little credit to Judy Gassam because she's moving ahead with a mental health discussion, I think next week, right, Judy?
This week.
Starting a discussion.
Great. Well, thank you for doing
Sorry.
that.
Okay, thank you. We have Pat next and then Haifa.
Yeah, thanks. So Isabel needs to be congratulated by somebody else on the committee for being it's just been a fabulous experience. And the team is really dedicated, and I think I have a lot of great ideas. I just want to, this subcommittee reaches so many other activities that are going on that we heard about today. Accessibility starts with an individual even being willing to listen to an opportunity. And I think sometimes we underestimate the challenges of communication. Isabel is exactly right. People think in stories. It's a very socially dynamic process. And this is as or more challenging than anything else that we've talked about today, particularly in today's state of mind where science and medicine are distrusted at such a high level, higher than at any other time, at least in modern history. The other thing I would say is, I think we need to be really careful about talking about stem cells and regenerative medicine across the board as the panacea for all human illness. Because we have to communicate based on what the science tells us. And while I don't disagree, there are components of behavioral health that relate to what we're talking about, particularly in the context of behavioral health related to physical and brain-based diseases. To talk about stem cell and regenerative medicine in the context of therapies for issues around behavioral health is another issue. So we just have to be cautious about how to do this, because science, particularly modern science, has a history, and scientists have a history of over-promising and under-delivering, and that does more damage than anything else. But I'm very excited about the committee and about the team's dedication, the staff to this process.
And now more than ever, Pat, we need authenticity and openness and building, once again, sort of rebuilding trustworthiness between these skeptical communities and the work of scientists. Was there somebody else on the hit parade, JT? Because I can't see.
Haifa's next.
Okay, Haifa, go ahead.
Isabel, I just wanted to say this is great work. And for me, working in the Valley, accessibility to underserved patients is definitely a priority. So if you need any help with patient education, happy to do it.
Great, thank you. Well, our team will consider when we need to go out there, what we need to do and how we need to do it. You will be the first one we call. Thank you. Anybody else?
Isabel?
Yeah.
Isabel, this is
Fred.
Maria. I projected a picture of the team at.
Oh, I love
at
it,
this weekend's
Maria.
parade. I wanted to thank Kevin Marks, who got this initiated for our team, to get us signed up and work with Maria and others to get that started. And we're really excited about all the other upcoming events that you mentioned, Isabel, so we can have a series of these. And as you see, it really brings, even in the banner that the team is carrying and the t-shirts, it really kind of, gets the Serm into the community. So I want to thank the team very much for their participation. You can see their smiling faces in the hot sun here.
Yeah.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, no, thank them very much. This kind of made my heart sing, but it also kind of broke my heart that we're still here working on, look at HIV/AIDS after all, although that is one thing we do have our arms around. But thrilled to see this happening and for us to be out there with folk. And I hope that they saw the message and also embraced the team. So we'll see. This is great. Thanks, Maria. Anything else?
Yes, Fred.
Hi, great work, Isabel, to you and your committee. It occurs to me that, since we do have patient advocates on this board, Serm is making a statement in that regard that specific patient populations, in particular, I guess, are represented. And it occurs to me that thinking about a communication strategy via the patient advocates to the patient groups that they represent is something to think about. At least it's got me thinking about, so there's that. And then that picture reminded me that, those same patient groups have events, very large public events. We have the Walk to Defeat ALS that goes on all over the state, and having Serm represented either in booths at those walks or, people walking to defeat ALS and as part of a Serm represented team, or, and I'm talking about ALS and MS has their activities. We have, their cycling events. There are places where Serm can be represented, where vendor booths are common. And so it's really just two comments. One is, what am I doing as a patient advocate to formally communicate, or how is your committee supporting my ability to do that? And then second, if there's a strategy for Serm to have a bigger presence at a number of different community events, particularly those that are attracting specific patient populations. Anyway.
Yeah, no, two good questions, Fred, two very excellent questions about, and this is where we would ask the board to at least write a list of one, the agencies that are out there in their geographic area that we may not know, and also for the patient advocates, obviously, but also some of the events, are coming up. And so that perhaps they can start to create a calendar. Our bigger problem, obviously, is man-woman power and whether and where we can be and how far can we go. One of the things that the team is looking at are trying to gather the analytics to help them understand at least where social media is working, how it's working, with whom it's working, and where we might want to focus more of our time and attention if it's been formally underserved. So maybe even when you talk about all of those different occasions around the state for your organization, you might think about places like the Central Valley. Who's that? Where are they having it? Because maybe that's an audience there that we need to reach, who's been not reached before. So that's where we want to put our manpower, dedicate our time. And that's why we need the board's input about who's where and what, so we can begin to see visually where these opportunities are, but where we can, if it aligns with the work we're trying to do with the community centers, in the geographic areas where there isn't as much representation, where we want to pull that up, that would be very helpful. So I invite all of the board members to keep that in mind and send us a one-pager of some ideas, thoughts, and places where we maybe should be and can lift more boats, if you will, Fred.
Would it make sense, rather than sort of getting random emails here and there, that are structured differently, if there was some kind of survey, using SurveyMonkey or some tool that will not only collect the data in a uniform way but aggregate it, and you can see it in a way that might be easier to manage than just a bunch of emails coming to an inbox somewhere.
That's a good idea. I'll check with Maria B to see what we can do and how we can do it. Doesn't have to be, a huge survey, maybe 3-4 questions, and just get some inputs. But thank you, that's a good idea too. I love surveys.
Maria?
Anybody else? Maria?
I was actually going to suggest something similar, that we could reach out with a survey or an email asking for that input. And in addition, we have participated in the past in things like, when the Huntington's group has a walk, they obviously aren't represented on the board, but we have been heavily involved with their organization, participated in the walks. We've done the same with various Parkinson's organizations. So this is something that we would love to increase and get into a broader scale. It's just much to what Isabel referred to as woman power. We just have to sort of figure out where we can geographically and how we can get that going in a bigger way.
Yeah. But I think critically, Maria, that it aligns with our need to reach those who are most have been underreached. Those audiences that we're really trying to raise their awareness of who we are, what we're doing, and bring them into those awareness of clinical trials and the support for that. So that's all very critical. Thank you very much for all of your input. I really appreciate it. And feel free to reach back to the comms team. And thank you very much, Maria B. and Katie and Kevin and Kevin and Esteban, for all of your work. Thank you. Back to you, JT.
Okay, thank you very much, Isabel and everybody. That was a great discussion, tremendous work product and progress here. So look forward to hearing more as things progress down the road. We've reached now the public comment part of the agenda, where the public can speak on any topic of interest. Maria, do you see any public comment out there?
No.
Okay, hearing none. I would be remiss if I did not begrudgingly congratulate the Warriors on their championship. I would like to point out that for a 2-week period, all of Los Angeles was supporting you because everybody here hates the Celtics so much. So we were very much aligned, and we're very happy that you won. So congratulations to the Warriors and all of you Warrior fans out there. Our next meeting, Maria, if I'm not mistaken, full board, we have a July 28th. Is that correct? Which is a little unusual to have one so close to this, but we have a lot of things we're trying to get accomplished through the board. We have indeed a number of subcommittees meeting in between now and then. This just happens to be a very busy stretch as we attend to all the different matters that need attention here. So with that, I want to, Maria, thank you for all your help as always in organizing and running the meeting here. To everybody on the team, continued congratulations on all the great accomplishments, and to the board for your tremendous support of all of that. So with that, I think that concludes today's busy agenda.